Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're diving deep into something I think we all kind of connect with, and that's describing your hometown in English. We don't want to just stick with the basics, though. We really want to help you guys captivate someone with your description. And to help us get there, I've got Sarah with me. Sarah is our language expert extraordinary.
It's great to be here, Mike.
So let's jump right in. Sarah, a lot of our listeners, they really want to talk about where they come from. But sometimes they get stuck using the same phrases over and over again, like it's a big city or the weather's nice. How do we help them kind of move beyond that and really paint a vibrant picture? What's the secret?
Well, I think it's all about moving beyond those generic terms and getting specific. So, like, instead of just saying, small town, you can use more interesting words like quaint or sleepy or even historic, if that fits.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you're picking out the perfect color to really capture the mood. But sometimes I struggle with that. Like, I feel like my vocabulary isn't big enough. How do we expand that vocabulary?
Absolutely. One thing you can do is you can try to use more similes and metaphors. So instead of saying the town square is busy, you could say something like, the town square is like a beehive buzzing with activity.
Oh, wow. I could see it. I could see it now. It's like you took me right there.
Exactly. And another thing that's really helpful is to use personal memories or experiences. Think about those special places that have meaning for you. Maybe it's that old corner store where you used to buy candy as a kid, or the park bench where you had your first kiss. When you share those little stories, you're not just describing a place, you're giving it life.
Oh, that reminds me of this bakery in my hometown. It wasn't anything fancy, but just the smell of fresh bread wafting out onto the street. It takes me right back to my childhood.
Exactly. Those sensory details like smells and sounds, even tastes, they can really help your listener connect with your description.
That makes me want to go back and visit. But what about how places change over time? How do we work that into our descriptions?
That's a great point. You can really add depth to your description by mentioning how your hometown has changed. Maybe that old movie theater got turned into a cafe, or a new skyscraper was built where a park used to be. Those changes, they really show how your hometown has evolved.
Yeah, it's like looking at those layers of paint. You can see the history. What about the people, though, Sarah? How do we capture the heart of the community?
Well, you can always use general words like friendly and welcoming, but I think it's more interesting if you get specific. Talk about what people do for work, what their interests are. So instead of saying people are nice, you could say my town is full of artists and musicians, or everyone in my hometown loves to go fishing, something like that. And you can also use that phrase blank friendly to describe the atmosphere. So like family friendly if there are lots of things for kids to do, or foodie friendly if it has amazing restaurants.
Blank friendly. I like that. It's a good way to get the point across. Sometimes I try to describe things in English, but I end up sounding really formal. How do I make it sound more natural without sounding like I'm reading from a textbook,
Yeah, I understand. I think it helps if you just imagine you're talking to a friend. Don't be afraid to use contractions or everyday language, even some slang if it feels right.
So it's all about being ourselves while still being descriptive.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between reading a travel brochure and listening to a friend tell you about their awesome vacation.
Exactly.
You want to hear about those funny little mishaps and the unexpected things they discovered?
Oh, and speaking of memorable, I think it's also really important to highlight what makes your hometown special. Like maybe it's a unique tradition or a famous landmark or even something weird about the weather. Whatever it is, celebrate it.
That reminds me of this festival in my hometown. Everyone dresses up in these medieval costumes, and they have this big jousting tournament. Sounds kind of crazy, but it's been going on forever.
That's amazing. It just goes to show that every hometown has something special to offer.
It's like sharing a secret. But I think having some structure is important too, right? So we don't just ramble on.
Yeah, for sure. One way to do it is to think chronologically. So you could start by describing your hometown when you were a kid, then talk about how it's changed, and finish by describing what it's like now. Or you could organize it by theme, like talking about the different neighborhoods, or the landmarks, or the food.
I like that. It's like giving them a map to follow.
Right. And, even though we want to be descriptive, it's important to think about our audience. If they don't know anything about your town, you might need to give them some more background. It's all about finding that balance.
It's like being a tour guide, but using words instead of a map. It's like building a world with words. Sarah, listening to you talk about all this, I'm realizing describing your hometown. It's not just about sharing facts. It's like sharing a part of who you are.
You're right, it is.
It's like giving someone a little souvenir, but instead of a keychain, it's made of words and memories.
Exactly. And the best thing is, those memories will never fade.
I love that. So I guess what we've learned today is, if you want to describe your hometown, it takes a few things. You need to use vivid language. You got to tell some stories. And it helps to have a little structure.
Exactly. And remember, there's no right or wrong way to do it. The important thing is to be yourself and have fun with it.
Well said, Sarah. This has been great. I'm feeling inspired to go describe my own hometown now.
It was great to be here.
And to everyone listening, remember to embrace those things that make your hometown special. Don't be afraid to play around with language and let your love for your hometown shine through. And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel. Until next time, happy learning. 59. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and I'm thrilled you could join us today for this deep dive into something pretty crucial, I think you'd agree, building new skills.
You bet.
And we've got Sarah here to share her expertise on how to navigate this crazy, always changing world where it feels like if you snooze, you lose when it comes to learning.
It's so true. And it's interesting because it's not just about keeping up with like the latest tech or whatever. It's really about personal growth, advancing your career and just overall staying engaged and confident in yourself.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. So let's unpack that a little bit. What makes continuous learning, always trying to learn new things, so important in today's world?
Well, for one thing, the job market is seriously competitive these days. For sure. I mean, there are always new technologies and approaches popping up, and the skills that were in high demand even a few years ago might be totally obsolete now.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that happen myself. Remember when just knowing, like, basic HTML was this awesome skill, and now it's like, who doesn't know at least a little bit of HTML? It's almost as common as knowing how to use a stapler.
You got it. And if we don't adapt, we risk being left behind.
Missing out on new opportunities.
Totally. Feeling stuck in our jobs, or even worst case scenario, finding ourselves without a job at all.
So continuous learning is definitely not optional, wouldn't you say?
It's essential.
But where do we even start? Like, how do we approach learning new things in a way that's not completely overwhelming and that'll actually help us get somewhere?
Well, the good news is there's a whole bunch of options out there. Traditional stuff like on-the-job training or going to workshops can still be really valuable.
Yeah, you're right.
You get that structured learning environment and often direct feedback from people who really know their stuff.
True. But those can be hard to fit in, with work and life and everything. Plus, sometimes they can be expensive. That's where those online platforms like Coursera or Udemy really shine, I think.
Oh, for sure.
They're super affordable, and you can learn at your own pace, which is great.
Yeah, and it's remarkable how easy it is to access knowledge now, right? I mean, you can literally learn anything from anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not just about watching videos or taking quizzes. Some of these platforms offer interactive exercises, real-world projects, and even online communities where you can connect with other people who are learning the same things.
That community aspect is huge, I think. Learning by yourself can feel really isolating. But when you've got a group of people, even if it's just online, cheering you on and helping you through those tough spots, it makes a world of difference.
Totally. It's like having a built-in support system to keep you motivated, answer your questions, and just make sure you're staying on track.
And it's not just about those formal ways of learning either, right? Think about all the skills we pick up just by volunteering, reading articles or blog posts about our industry, going to conferences, even just spending a day shadowing someone at work can teach you a ton.
So true. It's about being proactive and recognizing that learning opportunities are everywhere.
Exactly. Just be curious, be open to new experiences, and you'll find a ton of ways to grow your skills. I actually taught myself sign language a while back, using mostly YouTube tutorials, believe it or not.
Wow, that's awesome.
It was surprisingly easy to pick up and really rewarding too.
That's a great example of how accessible learning new skills can be nowadays. You don't necessarily need a fancy degree or an expensive course. It's more about having that drive to learn and finding the right resources.
So we've talked about why continuous learning is important in some ways to go about it. But what about the actual skills, right? Like, which skills should we be focusing on? This is where it gets really interesting.
It definitely does. Things are changing all the time, but there are a few key areas that are probably going to be in high demand for a while.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell us, what are those in-demand skills we should be adding to our toolkit for the future?
Well, first off, digital literacy is absolutely essential these days.
I think I've heard that somewhere before.
Things like AI, programming, and data analysis are becoming increasingly important in pretty much every industry now, from healthcare and finance to education and even the arts.
So even if you're not planning on becoming like a software engineer, having at least a basic understanding of those digital tools is crucial.
Totally. It's becoming the new baseline for navigating the professional world. But it's not just about technical skills. Being able to solve complex problems is another super valuable skill that employers are looking for.
So being able to think critically, break down complex situations, and come up with innovative solutions. Sounds like adaptability is key here.
You got it. And this actually leads nicely into another crucial area, sales and marketing.
Okay, interesting.
In today's digital world, businesses need people who can connect with their customers online, build strong relationships, and tell stories that really resonate.
So even if you're not in a traditional sales role, having those strong communication and persuasion skills is a major asset.
Absolutely. And of course, we can't forget about the good old-fashioned interpersonal skills. Communication, leadership, and teamwork. These are sometimes called soft skills, but let me tell you, they're incredibly important for success in any field.
I think we all know that one person who's a fantastic listener, who's super empathetic towards their colleagues, and who can handle even the trickiest conflicts with grace and calmness, those qualities are pure gold in any workplace, no matter what you do.
You're so right, and I'd add one more to the mix: flexibility. This goes beyond simply being able to adapt to change. It's about being open to new ideas, willing to step outside your comfort zone, and viewing learning as a lifelong adventure.
So it's not about reaching some kind of finish line. It's more about embracing that mindset of continuous growth and development.
Exactly.
It's exciting, for sure, but maybe a little intimidating too, right?
It can be, but ultimately it's incredibly empowering to know that we have the power to shape our own futures by constantly investing in ourselves and learning new things.
That's so true. I mean, it really is powerful. But I bet some people listening are thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but how do I actually make this happen? There's just so much information out there. It can feel totally overwhelming.
Oh, definitely. It's easy to feel overwhelmed. A good place to start, I think, is by setting realistic goals. Don't try to learn everything at once or become an expert overnight.
Right. So break down those big, ambitious goals into smaller, bite-sized pieces.
Exactly. Think about learning a new language. You wouldn't expect to be fluent after just a couple of lessons, would you?
No way. Takes time.
Yeah. You start with the basics, build a solid foundation, and then gradually work your way up from there.
That makes sense.
And this is actually where finding a mentor can be super helpful.
Yeah, mentor.
Yeah, or just someone who's already mastered the skill you're trying to learn.
Okay, yeah.
They can give you personalized guidance, feedback, that kind of thing. And they can help you stay motivated and focused on your goals.
Having that kind of guide, someone who's already walked that path, would be amazing. But what if you don't have access to a mentor? Are there other options?
Oh, for sure. There are tons of resources available nowadays, online forums and communities can be really great.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those.
You can connect with other people who are learning the same things you are, ask questions, share resources, get support.
It's like crowdsourcing your learning journey.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Okay, so we've set our goals, we've found some guidance, and now we're ready to get started. What's the most important thing we need to do to be successful?
Practice. I know it sounds obvious, but it's honestly where so many people struggle.
Really?
Yeah, you can't just passively absorb information, like watching videos or reading articles, and expect to master a skill. You have to actually roll up your sleeves and put what you're learning into practice.
It's like exercising a muscle,
Yeah.
right? The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
That's a great analogy. And just like with exercise, consistency is key when it comes to building new skills. Even if you can only dedicate a small amount of time each day, it'll make a huge difference in the long run.
So it's about finding ways to incorporate practice into our daily routines in a way that feels sustainable.
Exactly. Maybe you listen to a podcast on your commute, or read a professional development book for a few minutes before bed, or spend an hour working on a coding project. Just find what works for you and make it a habit.
Those little consistent actions really do add up.
You bet. And I think it's important to remember that building new skills is not about reaching some kind of finish line. It's an ongoing process. The world is always changing, and our learning should be too.
So it's about embracing that growth mindset of always learning, always being curious, always challenging ourselves to learn new things.
Precisely. There's a real beauty in that constant evolution. It keeps things interesting and keeps us engaged with the world around us, and that to me is super exciting.
I completely agree. And it makes all the effort totally worth it.
Yeah.
I love that. That sense of like always discovering something new and growing as a person. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But one thing that I hear a lot from people is, I just don't have the time to learn new stuff. Life is so busy, and it's easy to put learning on the back burner.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Time is definitely something we all struggle with, but I think the key is to remember that even small chunks of time can make a difference.
Like, you don't need to block off hours and hours every day to learn.
Not at all. It's more about shifting our perspective and finding those little opportunities throughout the day where we can sneak in a little bit of learning.
So instead of trying to find big blocks of time, it's more about being intentional with the little bits of time we have here and there.
Exactly. Maybe it's listening to an educational podcast while you're commuting, or reading a few pages of a book about something you want to learn before you go to bed.
Or even like spending 15 minutes on Duolingo or something.
Exactly. It all adds up.
Little by little. A little becomes a lot.
Right. You got it. And another thing I think is super helpful is to try to connect the things you're learning to your passions and interests.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Like if you're learning something new for work, but you're not super excited about it, maybe try to find a way to tie it into a hobby or something you already enjoy. It'll make it way more fun and engaging.
I like that. So for instance, if you're learning about data analysis for your job, but you're also like a huge foodie, you could try applying those data analysis skills to, say, analyzing recipes or something like that.
That's such a great example. It's about finding those connections that make learning feel less like a chore and more like a natural part of who you are.
I love it. Well, Sarah, this has been such a great conversation. We've covered so much ground today. I feel like I've learned a ton, and I hope our listeners have too. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Just to embrace the journey of lifelong learning. It's full of possibilities for growth, discovery, and ultimately a more fulfilling life.
That's a fantastic takeaway. Thanks again for joining me today, Sarah. It's always a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into building new skills. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring. Remember, no matter where you are in your learning journey, there's always something new to discover and a new skill to master. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more insightful discussions and deep dives into all sorts of fascinating topics. Thanks for listening. Hello, and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike.
And I'm Sarah.
It's great to have you here for a deep dive into something I think we all love, movies.
Yeah, definitely.
Today, we're going to be exploring how to talk about your favorite movie genres in English.
Thanks, fun.
It's all about, sharing what makes certain types of movies so special.
Right.
Not really getting, bogged down in like super technical definitions.
Exactly.
And you might be surprised how much your movie preferences reveal about you as a person.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Like if you were all about action flicks, maybe you've got a little bit of like a daredevil in you.
I can see that.
Or if you love a good tearjerker drama,
Yeah.
maybe you're a very empathetic person.
Right. I think there's definitely a link there.
Yeah.
We gravitate towards stories that resonate with us on some level.
For sure.
But why don't we jump into me with a genre that I think is very popular?
Okay.
Action movies.
Awesome. When you hear action, what comes to mind?
Um,
For me, it's all about excitement.
yeah.
Crazy stunts, these epic battles where good triumphs over evil. It's like a total escape.
Yeah, it's fascinating how action movies can fulfill that need in us.
Yeah.
It's almost like this kind of primal instinct, this desire to see these heroes just beat the odds.
Yeah.
And I think they offer us like a temporary escape from the ordinary, a chance to experience danger and victory, but obviously from a safe distance.
Right.
You think about movies like Die Hard.
Oh, yeah.
Or Mad Max, Fury Road. Like, those are perfect examples of just pure adrenaline-pumping action.
I totally agree. It's like riding a roller coaster, but from your couch.
Exactly.
Speaking of feeling good, how about we switch gears to a genre that's all about laughter?
Okay.
Comedy.
I love comedy. I think it's just a wonderful genre.
Yeah.
It just brings people together,
Yeah.
from all walks of life. Who doesn't love a good laugh?
Absolutely. And comedies aren't just about, silly jokes or anything like that.
Right.
They can also make us think about like the funny side of life, even when things are tough.
Yeah, definitely. They offer a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
They highlight the absurdity of certain situations or social norms, and sometimes laughter is exactly what we need to cope with life's challenges.
It's like a mental reset button.
Exactly.
One comedy that always stands out to me is Three Idiots.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen that one?
I have. It's fantastic.
It's a Bollywood film that's both hilarious and it's also got some like thought-provoking messages about like education, friendship, and following your dreams.
It's the perfect example of how comedy can entertain us, but also make us think a little bit deeper.
For sure, for sure. Okay, now for a genre known for its emotional depth.
Okay, drama.
Oh yes, drama dives deep into the human experience.
Yeah.
It explores complex relationships, it challenges our perspective.
Have you ever watched a movie and felt like you really understood a character?
Oh, many times.
Even if they were totally different from you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about drama. A well-made drama can really put you in someone else's shoes, allow you to feel their joys, their sorrows, their triumphs, their failures.
And what's impressive is even older dramas can still resonate with us today.
Right.
Like, take 12 Angry Men, for example.
Oh, classic.
Came out in 1957.
Wow.
But its themes of teamwork, challenging assumptions, considering different viewpoints.
Right.
All very relevant.
Absolutely. Good storytelling transcends time.
Yeah.
And 12 Angry Men is a prime example of that.
For sure. Okay, now let's blast off to a genre that pushes the boundaries of imagination.
Okay.
Science fiction.
I love sci-fi.
What about sci-fi excites you?
Well, I think what I find most captivating about it is its ability to explore all those what ifs.
Yeah.
What if technology advanced in this way? What if the future looked like this? It's a playground for ideas.
Yeah.
Where the impossible becomes possible.
It's like a mental vacation to another dimension.
Yeah.
A film that always comes to mind is Back to the Future.
Oh, a classic.
Even though it's decades old, the concept of time travel is still so fresh and exciting.
Yeah. Back to the Future perfectly captures the essence of great sci-fi.
Yeah.
That wonder and adventure, and it reminds us that our imaginations have no limits.
Right. And who knows, maybe someday time travel will be a reality.
You never know.
Now let's time travel in a different way.
Okay.
By talking about historical films.
I love historical films.
What do you like about them?
Well, they offer us this really unique way to learn from the past.
Okay.
We can witness key moments. We can gain a deeper understanding of different cultures and societies.
It's like having a time machine.
Exactly.
One historical film that I find captivating is Padmavat.
Oh, haven't seen that one.
It's a Bollywood film.
Oh, okay.
Based on Indian history, and it's visually stunning.
Wow.
And a really powerful story about courage, love, and sacrifice.
It's remarkable how these historical films can really immerse us in those different eras.
Yeah.
Introduce us to stories of bravery and resilience.
For sure.
Makes me wonder what other untold stories from the past are still out there,
Right.
waiting to be brought to the screen.
Exactly. As we've been talking about these genres, I've noticed something.
What's that?
There's often a lot of overlap.
Oh, yeah.
Some comedies have action.
Right.
Some dramas might have elements of sci-fi or fantasy.
Right. It's not like these rigid boxes,
Yeah.
It's more like guidelines that filmmakers can kind of play with and blend.
Yeah, to create something unique.
Exactly.
It's like mixing ingredients to create a whole new flavor.
I like that analogy.
Have you ever picked up any cool phrases or expressions from movies?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
Movies are a goldmine for language.
Right.
They introduce us to new words, new phrases.
Like a fun, sneaky language lesson.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we move on to some other genres,
Okay.
I want you, our listener, to think about what makes a movie truly captivating to you.
Yeah.
What are the things that stand out? Is it the special effects,
Yeah.
the cinematography, the music? Maybe a great performance by an actor?
All those elements contribute to a film's impact,
Yeah.
Special effects create those breathtaking visuals.
Right.
The cinematography sets the mood.
Yeah.
Music evokes those emotions.
Right.
Strong acting makes those characters feel real.
They all work together
They do.
to tell a story.
It's a collaborative art form.
Yeah.
With the power to connect us on such a human level.
Right. So we've covered action, comedy, drama, sci-fi, and historical films.
That's a lot.
But there are so many more exciting worlds to discuss.
I know. I'm excited.
Are you ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Continue our journey through this cinematic landscape. Okay, so let's step into a genre that I think a lot of people find fascinating, but also maybe a little bit scary.
Oh, okay.
Horror.
Oh, horror. Yeah.
A genre that really plays with our deepest fears.
I have to admit, this one's not really for me.
Yeah.
But I know lots of people love a good scare.
They do.
What is it about horror movies that draws people in?
Well, I think horror taps into those like primal fears that we all have, the
Right.
things that lick in the shadows of our minds.
Yeah.
It's a way to confront those fears in a safe environment.
Okay.
To get at adrenaline rush without actually being in any real danger.
Like a controlled dose of fear.
Exactly. And there are so many different types of horror out there.
Yeah.
You've got your classic supernatural horror with ghosts and demons.
Right, like The Exorcist.
Exorcist. Oh, that movie still gives me chills.
Yeah, that was a classic.
True classic.
Yeah.
It really pushed the boundaries and just terrified audiences.
Yeah.
But, horror isn't always just about those jump scares and supernatural beings.
Right.
There's also psychological horror,
Okay.
which really messes with your mind and leaves you feeling unsettled long after the movie's over.
Oh, like Get Out.
Get Out, yeah.
Yes. That movie was so creepy.
It was.
It had this whole social commentary woven into the horror.
Right.
Which made it even more impactful.
Exactly. Get Out brilliantly demonstrates how horror can also be a vehicle for exploring real-world issues,
Yeah.
like racism, social injustice. It's a film that really stays with you.
Okay, speaking of movies that stay with you,
Okay.
let's transition to a genre that's all about those heart-fluttering moments
Oh.
and those epic love stories.
Romance.
Romance.
Oh, yes, a genre that celebrates human connections,
Yes.
the joy, the heartache of love,
Yeah.
and that enduring hope of finding that special someone.
It's a genre that can make you believe in love again,
It can.
even if you've been hurt before.
Yeah, think about a movie like Titanic.
What Titanic classic.
Who wasn't sobbing during that final scene?
I know.
Titanic is the perfect example of a romantic epic.
Yeah.
It blends this sweeping love story
Right.
with historical drama and stunning visuals.
Oh, yeah.
It really captured hearts all over the world.
And that soundtrack.
Oh, the music.
Did you notice how music in a movie can completely change the mood?
It's so powerful.
It's like this secret ingredient that adds another layer of emotion.
Absolutely. Music plays such a vital role in film.
Yeah?
It can heighten tension, it can evoke nostalgia, it can amplify the emotional impact of a scene.
Right.
A soaring score can make a triumphant moment even more powerful, and a haunting melody can send chills down your spine.
Especially in a horror film.
Especially in a horror film.
It's like a secret language.
It is.
It speaks to our hearts.
I love that.
Okay, now let's journey to a genre filled with adventure and imagination.
Ooh, okay.
Fantasy. Yeah, fantasy films offer an escape to these magical worlds,
They do.
where the impossible is possible.
Oh, right.
We follow heroes on these epic quests.
Yeah.
We embrace wonder and enchantment.
It's like stepping into a dream.
It really is. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a prime example.
Oh, such a classic.
It has everything you could want in a fantasy: epic, brave, heroes, mythical creatures, epic battles,
It's true.
and this timeless story of good versus evil.
The Lord of the Rings is a true masterpiece of fantasy filmmaking.
It is.
It transported audiences to Middle-earth
Yeah.
and left a lasting impact on cinema.
And speaking of groundbreaking visuals, let's talk about animation.
Okay.
Animation is incredible.
It is.
I think it proves that you can tell any story, no matter how wild or imaginative,
Yeah.
and you don't have to be a kid to appreciate it.
Not at all. Animation is for everyone.
It really is, and the different styles of animation are amazing.
They are.
You've got your classic hand-drawn animation,
Right.
like in Disney's Toy Story,
Yeah.
and then you have computer-generated imagery, like in Avatar.
Avatar was a game changer.
It really was.
It pushed the boundaries of CGI
Yeah.
and created this truly immersive experience.
For sure, and let's not forget anime.
Oh, yes.
Like the Japanese masterpiece Spirited Away.
Spirited Away is a visual stunner.
It is.
It's so emotionally resonant. It explores themes of identity, courage, friendship.
Yeah, anime has a unique storytelling style and aesthetic.
It does.
That really captivates audiences worldwide.
Absolutely.
Okay, now let's explore a genre that focuses on real-life stories and perspectives.
Oh, okay.
Documentaries.
Documentaries.
Yeah.
They offer us a window into the world.
They do.
They shed light on important issues. They introduce us to fascinating people.
Yeah.
And they challenge our assumptions.
It's like taking a deep dive into a subject you might not know much about.
Exactly.
And there are so many incredible documentaries out there.
There are.
I recently saw Free Solo,
Oh, yeah.
about a guy who climbs El Capitan without any ropes or safety gear.
I've heard of that one.
It was terrifying and inspiring at the same time.
Free Solo is a great example of a documentary that combines those breathtaking visuals
Yeah.
with a really compelling human story.
Yeah,
It pushes the limits of physical and emotional endurance.
it does. Another documentary that I found really moving was Won't You Be My Neighbor,
Oh, I love that one.
about the life and legacy of Fred Rogers.
Such a heartwarming film.
It really is. It's a celebration of kindness, compassion, and human connection.
Absolutely. Documentaries can really open our eyes
Yes.
to different ways of seeing the world.
They can, and we can't forget about a genre that's so deeply rooted in American history and mythology,
Okay.
the Western.
Westerns, they
Yeah.
evoke this sense of adventure,
Yeah.
rugged individualism, the spirit of the American frontier.
You know, they often explore themes of justice, revenge, and that clash between civilization and wilderness.
Right.
They're full of iconic imagery.
Oh, yeah,
Cowboy saloons, gunfights, vast landscapes.
absolutely.
The Good, the Bad, the Ugly with Clint Eastwood.
Oh, a classic.
A true classic. It's stylish, suspenseful. It features these unforgettable characters.
Right.
And that haunting score.
Oh, the music is amazing.
It's so good. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly really redefined the Western genre.
It did.
And it continues to influence filmmakers today.
Absolutely. And another Clint Eastwood classic, Unforgiven,
Oh, yeah.
offers a more complex and morally ambiguous take on the Western archetype.
Yeah, Westerns can really make you think
They do.
about the nature of good and evil, right and wrong.
Yeah, they pose those big questions.
They do. Okay, now let's groove to a genre that's all about music and movement.
Oh, I love this genre.
Musicals.
Musicals, such a celebration of song and dance.
They can express a wide range of emotion.
They can.
From joy and exuberance
Right.
to heartache and longing.
Yeah,
They really transport you
they do.
and leave you humming those tunes long after the movie ends.
Absolutely. I love how musicals can just break into song and dance at any moment.
Me too. It's so unexpected and delightful.
It is.
There were so many classics to choose from.
Oh, so many.
Like The Sound of Music,
Oh, yes.
with its heartwarming story and those memorable songs.
The Hills Are Alive.
I know, and then you have more modern musicals like Moulin Rouge
Yes.
and Hamilton,
Hamilton is amazing.
which are really pushing the boundaries
Right.
with their innovative storytelling and musical styles.
Musicals are truly a captivating art form.
They are okay, and we have one more genre to cover before we wrap up.
Okay, let's hear it.
Thrillers.
Ooh, thrillers.
Yeah. What makes a good thriller, in your opinion?
Well, I think thrillers are all about suspense.
Okay,
Intrigue keeping the audience guessing.
right.
They often involve crime, mystery, psychological manipulation,
Yeah?
creating this sense of unease and anticipation that keeps you on the edge of your seat.
It's like a mental puzzle you have to solve.
Exactly. One of the best thrillers I've ever seen is Gone Girl.
Oh, Gone Girl.
Full of twists and turns.
Yeah,
You never know who to trust.
it keeps you guessing.
It does. Gone Girl is a brilliant example of a psychological thriller.
Yeah. And another thriller that always comes to mind is The Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, yes.
With its chilling portrayal of Hannibal Lecter.
Oh, so creepy.
That brilliant but twisted criminal mastermind.
Yeah, The Silence of the Lambs is definitely not for the faint of heart.
It's not. It gets under your skin and stays with you.
It does.
We've covered a lot of ground
But
today, exploring a wide range of movie genres.
It's been quite a journey.
From action-packed blockbusters to thought-provoking documentaries.
So many different worlds.
It's fascinating how each genre offers a unique lens through which to view the world,
Right.
inviting us to experience different emotions,
Yeah.
explore new ideas, and connect with stories from different cultures and time periods.
It's like having a passport to different worlds.
It really is.
All accessible through the magic of cinema.
So we've really gone through a lot today, huh?
We've covered everything from those adrenaline pumping action movies
Mhm.
to those heartwarming romances, those
Yeah.
mind-bending sci-fi flicks,
Totally.
to those documentaries that really just inspire you.
Yeah, we've explored a whole spectrum of movie genres.
It's been quite a journey through all those different kinds of movies, that cinematic landscape.
It is, and you know what's really remarkable?
Yeah,
Is how each genre offers like this unique perspective
right.
on the world. It's like they're inviting us to experience
Yeah.
all these different emotions, explore
Yeah.
all these new ideas,
Yeah.
connect with stories from, different cultures, different time.
It really is like we've traveled to all these different worlds
Yeah.
just from sitting here talking.
Right, exactly. And as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a question.
Ooh, a question. I like questions.
Yeah, we've talked about how movies not only entertain us,
Right.
but they can also influence how we see the world.
Right. They can challenge the way we think about things.
Totally. They can introduce us to new ideas, and they can even inspire us to make a difference.
Like sometimes a film can be that little spark
Yeah.
that just ignites our imagination
Yeah.
and motivates us to do something, to create something.
I love that.
So here's the question.
It could hit me.
If you had the chance to make a movie,
Okay.
what kind of story would you tell?
Oh, wow.
What genre would you choose, and what message
Yeah.
would you want to share with the world?
That is a really great question to think about.
It is.
It makes you think about, the power of storytelling
Right.
and the impact that a film can have.
Exactly. Just imagine,
Yeah.
all the possibilities. You could create, a historical drama.
Right?
Bring some, forgotten event to life.
Yeah.
Or you could make like a thought-provoking sci-fi thriller
Oh, yeah.
exploring, the ethics of AI.
Right.
Or you could even do like a lighthearted comedy just
Yeah.
to remind us all about, the importance of laughter and connection.
It's true. The possibilities are endless.
They are, and it's so inspiring to think about all those stories that are waiting to be told.
Yeah.
And all those different perspectives that we all bring to the table.
Right. So let their imagination run wild.
Yeah, let it go.
What kind of movie would you create?
That is a great challenge.
It is. Well, thanks for taking us on this incredible journey.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
The world of movies, it's been a fantastic conversation.
Absolute, Mike. It's been so much fun talking to you.
And a big thank you to all of our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into movie genres.
We appreciate you being here.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel
Yes, please do.
for more deep dives into all sorts of fascinating topics.
We have so much more to explore.
We do. And be sure to let us know in the comments what kind of movie you would make.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your ideas.
We would.
Until next time, keep exploring that vast and wonderful world of cinema.
Yeah.
It's a place where, stories come to life and imaginations run free.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe
Yeah.
someday
You never know.
we'll see your movie up on the big screen.
That would be amazing.
Sana Easter. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're going deep into something I think we've all had to deal with at some point, job interviews. I mean, it's more than just, showing up and crossing your fingers right. There's a real art to it.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost like you're giving a performance. You're trying to show off all your skills and everything you've learned, but at the same time, you got to connect with the person interviewing you.
Yeah, it's like a two-way street. You're trying to impress them, but you're also figuring out if this is even the right place for you. And to help us navigate this whole job interview maze, we've got the fantastic Sarah here. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
So, Sarah, we've got a mountain of research here, articles, tips, even some AI tools we can use. What really stood out to you from all this?
You know what surprised me is how much emphasis there is on getting ready before the interview. It's not just about having your answers ready. It's about having a plan to stand out from everyone else.
So it's more than just, sprucing up your resume and practicing that elevator pitch. What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, for one thing, you really need to do your homework on the company. And I don't just mean skimming their website. I'm talking a deep dive, understanding their values, the projects they've done recently, even checking out their social media.
Right, you want to show them you're really interested, that you've taken the time to learn about what they do. It's like, you wouldn't go on a date without checking out their Instagram first, right?
No, maybe not checking out, more like doing your research. But the point is, the more you know about the company, the better you'll be able to tailor your answers and ask questions that show you've been thinking. It shows you're serious.
That makes sense. So I should be setting up Google alerts for the company, maybe even looking through their LinkedIn profiles, see if I know anyone there. It's like being a detective gathering clues.
That's the spirit. And speaking of detectives, you can actually use some pretty cool AI tools to help you get ready.
Hold on. AI for job interviews. Now that sounds really advanced. Tell me more.
Imagine having a virtual interview coach right in your pocket. Tools like ChatGPT can help you practice answering those typical interview questions in a really structured way.
So it's not just about memorizing answers, but actually getting feedback on how you're saying things, making sure you're hitting the key points.
Precisely. And it can even help you come up with better questions to ask them, which is a huge plus. It shows you've been really thinking about the job and the company.
Wow. I'm feeling more confident already just hearing about this. It's like taking out all the guesswork. But let's say you've done all your research, you've practiced with your AI coach. What about the actual day of the interview? What are some must-dos?
Well, first impressions are everything, and that starts the second you arrive. Getting there 10 to 15 minutes early shows you're punctual and you respect their time. But don't show up too early. That can be just as bad.
Okay, so there's a sweet spot for being on time. Got it. And what about what to bring? Is there some secret survival kit every interviewee should have?
It's not a bad idea to have a few essentials with you. Think of it as your interview emergency kit. Breath mints a stain remover pen. Maybe an extra copy of your resume just in case. And don't forget a notepad and pen to jot down anything important or any questions that come up.
Ah, so it's like being a Boy Scout. always be prepared.
Exactly. You never know what might happen. And it's always better to be over-prepared than caught off guard.
Right, because even little things can make a difference in how you come across. Okay, so I'm prepped, I'm on time, I've got my survival kit, I'm in the waiting room now. What?
Now's when you put all that research and practice to work. But before you even step foot in the interview room, remember this. Be nice to everyone you meet, from the receptionist to anyone you pass in the hallway. Every interaction matters.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that. Like you're auditioning the moment you walk through the door.
Exactly. You never know who might be watching, and positive feedback from anyone can really help.
That's a good point. So be polite, be engaging. Who knows, maybe that friendly chat with the receptionist will earn you some bonus points.
Absolutely. It's all about creating a good impression, and that goes beyond just the person hiring you.
Okay, so I've made it through the pre-interview gauntlet, charmed the receptionist, and now I'm face-to-face with the hiring manager. What's the first thing I do?
Well, first, take a deep breath and try to relax. It's natural to feel nervous, but try to channel that energy into positive enthusiasm.
Easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it makes sense. Nobody wants to interview a robot.
Exactly. They want to see your personality come through. And remember, the interview is a conversation, not an interrogation. So listen carefully, engage with the questions. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you need to.
So it's a two-way street. I'm showing them who I am, but I'm also getting a feel for their company culture and whether it was a good fit for me.
Right. It's about finding that connection.
Speaking of connection, what about body language? I've heard it plays a huge role in how we're perceived. Should I be doing power poses in the bathroom beforehand?
Well, maybe not power poses, but definitely pay attention to your posture and eye contact. Sitting up straight, leaning in a little when they're talking, and keeping good eye contact shows you're engaged and confident.
Got it. Confidence, not arrogance. I can do that. But what about all those tricky behavioral questions they always ask? You know, the tell me about a time when kind of questions.
Yes, the dreaded behavioral questions. They can be a bit intimidating, but there's a way to handle them effectively. It's called the STAR method.
STAR method. That sounds interesting. Tell me more.
So STAR stands for Situation, Task, Action, and Result. It's a framework for structuring your answers in a way that's clear and compelling. Basically, you start by describing the situation you were in, then outline the task you had to accomplish. Next, you explain the actions you took to address the situation. And finally, you highlight the result of your actions.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like telling a mini story that shows off your skills and experience. So instead of rambling on, I can give a concise and impactful answer that the interviewer will actually remember.
Exactly. And the great thing about the STAR method is that you can use it for almost any behavioral question. So if you practice using this framework, you'll be ready for anything they throw at you.
Okay, I'm taking notes here. STAR method check. Now let's talk about something I've always struggled with. How to subtly steer the conversation towards my strengths without sounding like I'm bragging. Any tips for that?
It's definitely a balancing act, but remember, the interviewer wants to hear about your accomplishments and what makes you a strong candidate. It's not bragging if you're simply presenting your skills and experiences in a way that's relevant and engaging.
Right. It's all about framing it in the context of the job you're applying for. So for example, if I'm interviewing for a writing position, I might talk about how my blog has thousands of followers and how I've been honing my storytelling skills over the years.
That's a great example. You're highlighting your relevant skills and achievements without sounding boastful. And remember, you can always use the interviewer's questions as a springboard to showcase your strengths.
All right, so if they ask about a time I faced a challenge, I can talk about a time I overcame a writing obstacle and how that experience made me a better writer.
Exactly. It's all about connecting the dots and showing how your experiences have prepared you for this role.
This is all making so much sense. It's like you're taking the mystery out of interviews and giving me a clear roadmap to success.
That's what we're here for. We want you to feel confident and prepared going into your next interview.
Well, I definitely feel more equipped now than I did before. We've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still so much more to unpack. We'll be back after a quick break to dive deeper into acing those interview questions and making sure you leave a lasting impression. Okay, we're back and ready to tackle the next stage of this job interview journey. We've talked about preparing, doing our research, even using AI to rehearse our answers. But now it's showtime. We're in the hot seat. The interviewer is looking at us expectantly. Sarah, what are some things we really need to nail at this point?
Well, Mike, something that people often forget is the power of really listening. It's not just about giving them the right answers. It's about showing you're genuinely interested and having a real back and forth.
Oh, I see what you mean. So instead of just spitting out memorized answers, I should be listening carefully, maybe even taking notes, to show I'm present and really taking in what they're saying, kind of like what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Taking notes not only shows you're engaged, it also helps you remember important details later, especially if they have follow-up questions. And you know what else it does?
That's that.
It gives you a little time to think. Instead of jumping right into an answer, you can jot down a couple keywords, gather your thoughts, and then give a more well-thought-out response.
That's brilliant. It's like a secret weapon for staying cool under pressure. I'm adding note-taking ninja to my resume.
Haha, I love it. And while we're on the subject of showing off your skills, let's talk about a subtle but powerful technique: steering the conversation towards your strengths.
Okay, now this is where things can get tricky. We don't want to sound like we're taking over the interview or bragging about ourselves.
Right. The key is to look for natural opportunities to highlight your most relevant experience. For example, if they ask about a time you worked on a team project, you could talk about a project where you took on a leadership role, or used a specific skill that connects back to the job description.
So it's about weaving in your accomplishments and skills in a way that feels natural, not forcing it, just letting it flow with the conversation.
Exactly. You're not trying to trick anyone. You're just showcasing the parts of your experience that are most relevant to the job.
Got it. Now, I've noticed that some people have this natural charm, this it factor, that makes them instantly likable. Can you learn that, or are some people just born with interview magic?
I think anyone can be charismatic. A lot of it comes down to confidence and how you present yourself. Remember what we said about body language. It can say a lot.
Right. So good posture, eye contact is a genuine smile. All of those things help create that impression of confidence and likability.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the words you say, it's how you say them. Speaking clearly, using different tones of voice. Even pausing for emphasis can make your answers more engaging and memorable.
Okay, so I'm picturing myself in the interview. I'm sitting up straight, making eye contact. I'm speaking with confidence and clarity. What else can I do to really knock it out of the park?
You know what often trips people up? Not making enough eye contact? You'd be surprised how many interviewers are turned off by candidates who avoid their gaze.
Really? I would have thought it'd be the other way around. Like staring too intensely would be weird.
It's about finding a balance. You don't want to stare them down, but you also don't want to look like you're hiding something. Think of it as making a connection, showing you're present and involved in the conversation.
So maintaining eye contact shows confidence and helps build that connection.
Got it. But what about when you get those really tough questions? The ones that make your mind go blank. Any tips for handling those smoothly? Remember the STAR method we talked about earlier? That's your secret weapon for any behavioral question, no matter how difficult. It helps you structure your thoughts and give a clear, concise, and powerful answer.
Right. The STAR method: situation, task, action, result. It's like a formula for interview success.
Exactly. And the more you practice using this framework, the more natural it will become. It will help you stay on track, even when you're feeling the pressure.
This is great stuff, Sarah. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand the secrets of the job interview. But what happens is the interview is wrapping up. How do I make sure I leave a good impression? Increase my chances of getting that call back. This is where I always feel like I mess up. I'm so relieved it's almost over. I forget to actually, sell myself one last time.
It's like a big finish, right? You want to end on a strong note, and this is where those insightful questions you prepped earlier can really shine.
Oh, right. Not just, when can I start, but real questions that show I was paying attention to everything they said.
Exactly. Ask about things that show you understand the role, the company's goals. Maybe even some challenges they mentioned. For instance, you could ask about their team dynamics, opportunities for growth, or upcoming projects you could contribute to.
Ooh, good ones.
Yeah.
It's like I'm already imagining myself there, brainstorming with them.
Precisely. It shows you're thinking ahead and eager to be part of their success. And of course, always wrap up by thanking the interviewer for their time and reiterating your interest in the position.
So a little gratitude and enthusiasm go a long way.
Absolutely. It leaves them with a positive final impression. But the interview process doesn't end there, does it?
Wait, there's more. I thought I could finally relax.
Almost. Don't forget the all-important thank you note.
Ugh, thank you notes. They feel so old school, like something my grandma would make me do.
I know, but believe me, they still matter. It shows you're professional and that you genuinely appreciate their time. Plus, it keeps you top of mind with the hiring manager.
Okay, fine. I'll write a thank you note. But what if I don't hear back right away? How long should I wait before following up? Should I be hitting refresh on my inbox every 5 seconds?
Patience is key, Mike. Give them a week or so to decide. Then if you haven't heard anything, a polite follow-up email is perfectly fine.
So no need to stalk them on LinkedIn or blow up their phone.
Definitely not. A simple professional email expressing your continued interest is enough.
Okay, so thank you note, sent follow-up email, ready to go. What if, and this is the worst case scenario, they don't offer me the job?
Don't get discouraged. Rejection is just part of the game. Not every role is the right fit, and that's okay.
Easier said than done, though, when you're feeling disappointed.
I know. But try to look at it as a learning opportunity. What can you take away from the interview? What could you have done differently? Maybe even reach out to the hiring manager and politely ask for feedback.
Okay, so instead of feeling sorry for myself, I should use it as a chance to grow and improve my interview skills. Turn that rejection into fuel for my next interview.
Exactly. And who knows, the next interview might just be the one that lands you your dream job.
You've given us so much to think about today, Sarah. It's like we've uncovered all the secrets of the interview process from the very beginning to that final follow-up.
I hope so, Mike. Remember, confidence is key. Believe in yourself, showcase your skills, and don't be afraid to let your personality shine through.
Let my personality shine. I love that, because at the end of the day, that's what makes us unique, right?
Absolutely. Authenticity is always a good thing. And you know what? Some of these interview skills we've talked about can actually help you in other areas of life too.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Like what?
Well, think about it. Active listening, communicating clearly, being able to tell a good story. These are valuable skills in any situation, whether you're networking, giving a presentation, or even just having a casual conversation.
Wow, you're right. It's like we've discovered a secret code for success, not just for job interviews, but for life in general.
Exactly. So go out there, rock those interviews, and remember, you've got this.
That's right. Thanks for joining us today, Sarah. Your insights have been incredibly helpful. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to the Learn English Lab. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into all sorts of interesting topics. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep shining.
Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm your host, Mike, and I'm so glad you could join us for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something that's universal, but expressed in incredibly diverse ways: love and relationships. And to help us navigate this fascinating linguistic landscape, we have the brilliant Sarah joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Sarah, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
You know, I was thinking about it earlier when I was prepping for this deep dive, and it really struck me just how many unique phrases and idioms English has for this topic.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It really is remarkable.
It's like we needed a whole secret code just to express the various stages and shades of love. I mean, we have everything from puppy love to describe those first innocent crushes all the way to growing old together, which kind of evokes, you know, a lifetime of commitment.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about how significant love and relationships are in English-speaking cultures.
Absolutely.
It's not just about the sheer number of phrases, but it's also the distinct ways we use language, depending on the situation.
Yeah.
For instance, you wouldn't use the same language talking to your best friend about a crush as you would with your grandmother.
Oh, absolutely. That's so true.
Right?
And that's something that English learners really need to be aware of. There's a big difference between saying, I fancy you and I'm deeply in love with you. Getting those two mixed up could lead to some awkward moments.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Understanding the nuances of formality and informality is really crucial. Think of it like a dress code for your language.
Okay.
Platonic, for example, is a more formal term to describe a friendship without romantic feelings.
Right.
Whereas, like, having a thing for someone is much more casual and playful.
Yeah, you wouldn't use platonic in a casual conversation. It would sound way too stiff.
Exactly.
And on that note, it's interesting how we have expressions for both the idealization of love and the more realistic, sometimes messy side of relationships.
Yeah.
We dream of love at first sight and finding our soulmates. But we also have terms like breakup and infidelity.
Right.
For when things don't go as planned.
It's like we're acknowledging that love isn't always a fairy tale.
Right?
And this is where it gets really interesting. Some of the expressions that we use, especially for heartbreak, use surprisingly intense, even violent imagery.
Oh, really?
We talk about falling head over heels, which sounds kind of dangerous, or being dumped as if you've been discarded like trash.
Yeah, dumping someone must sound harsh, doesn't it?
It
It
does.
sounds like you're literally throwing them away.
Exactly. It makes you wonder why we use such forceful language when we're talking about something as tender as love. Perhaps it reflects how powerful those emotions can be. The highs are exhilarating, but the lows can feel devastating, almost like a physical blow.
It's true. Heartbreak can feel physically painful, can it?
It can.
And it's not just about breakups either. We have phrases like driving someone crazy with desire, which evokes a sense of losing control, almost like a force of nature. But of course, it's not all doom and gloom. We all have tons of endearing expressions that capture the sweeter side of love.
Oh, absolutely. Phrases like the apple of my eye or saying that you're smitten with someone are incredibly charming.
They really are.
Don't you think?
And they often have fascinating historical roots. Like the apple of my eye dates back centuries. It originally referred to the pupil, which was seen as essential for sight, and therefore extremely precious. It's amazing how these expressions have evolved over time, but still retain their emotional power.
It is fascinating, isn't it? And it speaks to that enduring human need to express these complex feelings of love and connection.
Speaking of evolution, it's interesting how some phrases gain popularity, while others kind of fade away. You don't hear people saying courting someone as much these days. It feels almost old-fashioned.
You're right. Going on a date or hanging out are much more common now.
It makes you realize how language is constantly adapting to reflect the changing dynamics of relationships.
Exactly. And this leads us to another crucial element of love and relationship vocabulary, phrasal verbs.
Well, yes.
We ask someone out, we go out on dates, we break up when things don't work out, and hopefully we settle down with someone special.
Phrasal verbs are essential for navigating the ups and downs of relationships in English.
I think so.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
But I know they can be a bit tricky for learners because they often have multiple meanings and can change depending on the context.
Absolutely. Take the phrasal verb go out, for example.
Okay.
It can mean simply leaving your house, I'm going out for a walk, or it can refer to dating someone. We've been going out for 6 months. The context is key.
Yeah, it is indeed. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to how native speakers use these phrasal verbs in different situations. It's like learning the secret handshake of fluency.
I love that analogy. It's all about getting comfortable with the nuances and the idioms that make English so expressive. But, beyond just fluency, I think learning these phrases kind of offers a window into the English-speaking world's attitudes towards love and relationships.
That's a great point. It's not just about understanding the words themselves, but also the cultural values and beliefs they reflect.
Yes.
Like the phrase making things official might have different connotations depending on the culture and how relationships are typically viewed.
Exactly. It's about understanding the unspoken rules and expectations that shape how people interact in different cultures.
And speaking of unspoken rules, I've always been fascinated by how we use the verb to see when talking about dating.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm seeing someone. It's so understated, isn't it?
It is, and it's a great example of how English can be quite subtle when it comes to matters of the heart. Seeing someone implies a romantic connection without explicitly stating it. It leaves room for interpretation, which can be very intentional in the early stages of a relationship.
It's like testing the waters, before diving headfirst into a full-blown relationship. And on that note, some of our expressions for love are so poetic and evocative.
They are.
The light of my life, for instance. It's just beautiful, isn't it?
It is. It paints such a vivid picture of someone who brings joy and radiance into your world.
And it highlights how we often use metaphors from the natural world to describe love. My heart is aflame. You set my soul on fire. These phrases convey the intensity and passion of love, almost like an uncontrollable force.
Absolutely.
It's not just positive feelings either. We have phrases like carrying a torch for someone, which implies a longing, often unrequited love.
Yeah.
It's interesting how even in our language, we acknowledge the bittersweet aspects of love.
Absolutely. Carrying a torch actually has a fascinating origin.
Does it?
It comes from ancient Greek mythology, where rejected lovers would literally carry torches
Wow.
to symbolize their unrequited love.
I never knew that. It's amazing how these phrases have such deep roots in history and mythology. And speaking of history, I find it fascinating how gender roles and societal expectations have influenced the language of love. Like the phrase, "a man's got to do what a man's got to do," often implies a sense of duty and responsibility, particularly in the context of relationships and providing for a family.
That's a really insightful observation. It does reflect traditional gender roles, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And how about the phrase wearing the pants in a relationship? That one definitely evokes a sense of power dynamics and who's in control.
It does, and it's interesting to think about how these phrases might be perceived differently in modern relationships, where those traditional roles are being challenged and redefined. Speaking of challenges, some phrases highlight the humorous side of relationships.
Oh, for sure.
You drive me crazy. Could be endearing or exasperating, depending on the context.
Oh, definitely. It captures that playful banter and loving exasperation that can be part of a close relationship. And it's a reminder that love doesn't always have to be serious and intense. There's room for laughter and lightheartedness, too.
Absolutely. We need those moments of levity to balance out the more intense emotions that come with love and relationships. And it's also important to remember that language is always evolving.
It is.
New phrases and slang terms emerge all the time, especially among younger generations.
That's right. And that's what keeps language so vibrant and dynamic. It's constantly adapting to reflect the changing ways we experience. And talk about love. Think about terms like ghosting or benching, which describe very specific dating behaviors that have become more prevalent with the rise of social media and online dating.
Those are perfect examples. And it shows how technology and social trends have a direct impact on the way we communicate. About relationships, it's like language is a living organism, constantly growing and changing.
It is.
And for English learners, keeping up with these changes could be part of the fun. It's like you're always unlocking new levels of understanding.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the key is to just embrace this playful, ever-evolving aspect of language. Don't be afraid to experiment with new phrases and idioms. Even if you make a mistake, it's all part of the learning process.
Right. And the more you immerse yourself in the culture, the more naturally these expressions will come to you.
Absolutely.
Watch movies, listen to music, talk to native speakers. Don't be shy about asking questions. It's all about absorbing the language in its natural habitat.
That's excellent advice. And remember, learning a language is a journey, not a destination. So be patient with yourself and enjoy the process. Who knows? You might even find that your newfound language skills lead to some unexpected connections and experiences along the way.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the language of love and relationships in English. It's been an absolute pleasure exploring this fascinating topic with you.
The pleasure was all mine. I always enjoy these conversations.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this linguistic adventure. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and maybe even learned a few new phrases to spice up your English conversations.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more deep dives into the fascinating world of language. Until next time, happy learning.
It really has been a fascinating journey, hasn't it?
It has.
And I think what's so captivating about the language of love and relationships is that it's constantly evolving. New phrases pop up, old ones fade away. It's a reflection of how we as a society are constantly redefining what love and relationships mean to us.
Absolutely, and that's what makes it so intriguing for language learners. It's not just about memorizing vocabulary, it's about understanding the cultural context, the nuances, the humor, the heartbreak, all the messy, beautiful things that make up human connection.
So well said. And as we wrap up, I'm curious, what advice would you give to English learners who are feeling a bit overwhelmed by all these phrases and idioms? Any tips for making them stick?
That's a great question. I'd say first and foremost, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Language learning is all about experimentation and practice. The more you use these expressions, the more comfortable you'll become. And don't just focus on memorizing definitions. Try understand the imagery behind them, the emotions they evoke, the stories they tell.
That's such great advice. It's like you're not just learning words, you're learning a whole new way of seeing the world and expressing yourself.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to learn everything at once.
Okay.
Start with a few phrases that resonate with you, maybe ones that relate to your own experiences with love and relationships, and then gradually expand your repertoire.
I like that strategy. It's about making it personal and finding those connections that make language learning truly meaningful.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of context. Watch movies, listen to songs, read books, pay attention to how native speakers use these phrases in everyday conversation. The more you immerse yourself in the language, the more naturally it will start to flow.
Such valuable advice. It's about surrounding yourself with the language and letting it seep into your subconscious.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, I'm struck by something you said earlier about how language reflects cultural values. And I think that's a really important point for English learners to keep in mind. The way we talk about love and relationships reveals a lot about our beliefs and expectations, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and it can vary significantly across cultures. So while learning these phrases is essential for fluency, it's equally important to be mindful of the cultural context and to avoid making assumptions or generalizations.
That's a crucial point. It's about respecting the cultural differences and understanding that language is not always a one-to-one translation of meaning.
Exactly. It's about appreciating the diversity of perspectives and the richness that different cultures bring to the language of love.
Well said, Sarah. It's been an absolute delight having you on the Learn English Lab today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights.
The pleasure was all mine, Mike. It's always a joy to discuss language and its intricate connection to human experience.
And to all our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the language of love and relationships in English. We hope you've enjoyed the journey and learned some valuable lessons along the way. Don't forget to share your favorite love and relationship phrases in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more language learning adventures. Until next time, happy learning. COCPS.
Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're going deep on a topic that can really change your life.
The art of networking.
Exactly, and to help us navigate this fascinating world, I've got the insightful Sarah with me today.
Happy to be here, Mike. Ready to unlock the power of connection.
Absolutely. When I used to think about networking, it always felt like those awkward, forced conversations at those stuffy industry events.
Yeah.
But going deep on all this, my perspective has completely changed.
Okay.
It's so much more than just trying to get a new job.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mike. It's a really common misconception that networking is like this thing you only do when you need a favor.
Right.
When you need something from somebody. It's actually an ongoing process,
Yeah.
It's about building real relationships that can actually improve every part of your life.
And it's fascinating because it's not even just about those business cards and contacts, right? It's about making real human connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about coming to every interaction with like a generosity, a willingness to help other people without expecting anything back.
It's funny you say that because one of the biggest themes in everything we looked at is this idea of helping others.
Right.
Like help other people, and it comes back to you in ways you don't even expect.
It's not about expecting anything back immediately.
Right.
But it's about fostering that genuine desire to connect with people,
Yeah.
to understand their experiences, to offer your support when you can.
I remember reading this story about someone who offered to help an old colleague with a project,
Oh, yeah.
even though they didn't want anything from him.
Right.
And later, that same colleague ended up referring them to their dream job.
Wow.
It just shows how powerful it can be. Those acts of kindness can really come back around.
It really is. It's about nurturing those relationships even when you don't need anything.
Right.
And those are often the connections that turn out to be the most valuable.
It's like you're putting money into this relationship bank account.
You're making these deposits of kindness and generosity.
Yeah.
So that when you need to,
Make a withdrawal.
make a withdrawal, you have it.
Yeah. And those withdrawals don't always have to be like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Right.
Sometimes it's just about having someone to talk to,
Oh, yeah.
bounce ideas off of, or offer support during like a tough time.
Another thing that really stuck with me was this emphasis on real, genuine interest.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds so simple, but so many people just don't do it. It's not about trying to sell yourself or impress people with what you've done.
It's about genuinely focusing on the other person.
Yeah.
Their interests, their goals.
Exactly.
People are just drawn to those who really want to understand them.
It's like you're flipping the script on all that old networking advice. Instead of thinking, what can this person do for me? You're thinking, what can I learn from this person? How can I help them reach their goals?
And that change is so powerful, it takes the pressure off.
Of like self-promotion and lets you connect on a much deeper level.
One thing I found really surprising was that it's not always about those big formal networking events.
Yeah.
Sure, those
conferences and industry gatherings have their place.
Right.
But you can make meaningful connections anywhere.
You can. It's about seeing every interaction as a potential opportunity to connect.
Yeah.
It could be a conversation with someone at a coffee shop,
Right.
a volunteer event, or even just striking up a conversation with someone on LinkedIn.
It's almost like networking is always on,
Absolutely.
a way of approaching the world with curiosity.
And that's what's exciting. You never know where these connections might lead or how they might improve your life.
So let's say you're at one of these events or you just met someone interesting.
Right.
What are some practical tips for moving beyond those surface level interactions
Okay.
and actually building something real?
One thing that kept coming up was finding common ground.
Yeah.
Whether it's a shared alma mater, a passion for a hobby, or even just a favorite book, those points of connection can really spark a conversation and lead to a deeper relationship.
It's like you're looking for those little shared experiences,
Yeah.
those things that say, hey, we have something in common.
And it's not just about finding common ground, it's about actively seeking it out.
Yeah.
Asking open-ended questions, listening carefully, and showing that you're really willing to share your own interests and experiences.
Right.
This creates that sense of rapport and makes the other person feel seen and heard.
It's like that saying, to be interesting, be interested.
Exactly.
The more you focus on learning about the other person, the more likely you are to find shared passions and build that genuine connection.
And don't underestimate the power of just saying thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Expressing gratitude shows that you value the interaction and you're serious about building a relationship.
That's such a good point. Sometimes the smallest things have the biggest impact.
Absolutely. It's those personal touches that make networking more than just a transaction.
Yeah.
It turns it into a real connection.
Speaking of making a connection, one thing that really surprised me was how much emphasis was placed on going beyond the surface.
Yeah.
Sure, business cards and elevator pitches have their place,
Right.
but truly meaningful connections often come from shared values, common interests, and that genuine curiosity.
It's about going beyond those superficial interactions
Yeah.
and really getting to know the person behind the title or their work persona.
So how do we do that? How do we move beyond the small talk and make a deeper connection?
One of the best strategies is to ask good questions.
Yeah.
Not just what do you do, but questions that go into their passions, their challenges, what they want to achieve.
So instead of asking, what company do you work for?
Right.
You might ask, what's the most exciting project you're working on right now?
Exactly. Or instead of what's your role, you might ask, what made you want to do this in the first place?
Those are great examples. It's about asking questions that spark a real conversation.
Right.
Questions that let the other person share their story
Yeah.
and show their true selves.
And it's just as important to be willing to share your own story, your own experiences,
Yeah.
and even your vulnerabilities.
Because vulnerability creates connection, right?
Absolutely.
Oh.
When we let our guard down and share our true selves, it creates a space for others to do the same.
That's so true.
Yeah.
It's about creating that feeling of, hey, we're both in this together.
Exactly. And that's when those really special connections happen.
It's amazing how those little changes in how we think can have such a big impact on how we network.
Yeah.
It's about seeing networking not as a chore
Right.
or something you have to do, but as a chance to connect with interesting people,
Exactly.
learn from them, and build relationships that can make our lives better in so many ways.
It really is.
Well said, Sarah. I think we've covered a lot of ground here in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've talked about the importance of genuine interest,
Yeah.
finding common ground, and asking thoughtful questions.
Uh-huh.
But let's get even more practical. What are some specific tips for making a lasting impression and nurturing those connections over time?
One thing that came up over and over was following up.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds simple, but so many people just forget about it after an initial meeting.
Yeah, it's like you go to an event, you meet all these people,
Right.
exchange business cards, and then
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. But following up promptly and in a meaningful way is really important.
right?
It shows that you were listening, that you valued the conversation, and that you want to build a relationship.
So what does good follow-up look like?
It doesn't have to be anything complicated.
Right.
Just a quick email or LinkedIn message saying you enjoyed the conversation,
Yeah.
and mentioning something specific you talked about can go a long way.
For example, you could say something like, it was great talking to you about topic.
Right.
I'm really interested in learning more about the specific area they mentioned.
Or if they mentioned a challenge they were facing, you could offer a resource or a connection that might help.
It's all about showing you are listening and that you genuinely want to help.
And don't forget about handwritten notes.
Oh, yeah.
In today's digital world, a personal handwritten note can really stand out.
I love that. It's so thoughtful and unexpected.
And it doesn't have to be a long letter.
Right.
Just a couple of lines expressing your appreciation and referencing something from your conversation can make a big difference.
It's those little things that show you're going the extra mile.
Right. You're not just going through the motions.
You really care.
Exactly.
Another tip I found helpful is to keep a networking journal or a spreadsheet
That's a great idea.
where you jot down notes about the people you meet.
It can be as simple as their name, company, and a few key details about their interests
Right.
or goals.
That way, when you follow up or see them again,
Right.
you can reference those details and personalize your interactions.
Exactly. It shows that you were paying attention and that you value the relationship.
And it can be really helpful for remembering those little things that can make a difference, like their kids' names or a favorite hobby.
It's those personal touches that turn networking into a real connection.
So we've talked about following up and keeping track of our connections.
Yeah.
How do we nurture those relationships over time?
One of the best ways is to consistently provide value.
Yeah.
This could be sharing relevant articles, industry insights, or introducing them to people in your network who might be helpful.
So it's about being a resource, a connector,
Wow.
someone who's always looking for ways to help others.
And it's not just about professional support. It's
Right.
also about being there for them personally.
Like checking in with them,
Right.
congratulating them on their successes,
Yeah.
or just listening when they're going through a tough time.
Exactly. It's those acts of care and support that strengthen those bonds and turn acquaintances into true friends.
And those friendships can lead to opportunities you never saw coming.
Absolutely. It's all about building those authentic connections, nurturing them over time, and seeing where they lead.
Now let's talk about some of the common mistakes people make when networking. Okay. One thing that kept coming up was putting people on pedestals.
Ah, yes. That classic mistake of being so impressed by someone's title or accomplishments that we forget they're human.
It's like we forget they're just people too,
Right.
with their own hopes and fears.
And when we put them on a pedestal, it creates this imbalance.
Yeah.
We come across as insincere or even desperate,
Right.
which can actually make it harder to connect with them authentically.
So how do we avoid that trap?
It starts by remembering that everyone, regardless of their achievements, deserves to be treated with respect
Right.
and humility.
It's about approaching every interaction as an opportunity to connect with another human being.
Exactly. Not a title or a LinkedIn profile.
Right.
And remembering that real connections are built on shared values, common interests, and mutual respect.
Not on hierarchy or how important we think someone is.
Right.
Another common mistake is being too pushy or demanding,
Oh, yes. The classic hard sell.
like bombarding people with requests for favors, introductions, or advice without having built a real connection or shown that you're willing to help them too.
And it almost always backfires.
People can tell when someone's just trying to use them.
Yeah.
It's a huge turnoff.
It's about understanding that building trust and rapport takes time. It's about focusing on nurturing those relationships, not on what you can get out of them.
One of the sources shared this story about someone who was constantly asking their old boss for job referrals,
Oh, yeah.
but never really checked in or offered any help in return.
Right.
Eventually, that boss just started avoiding them.
It's a perfect example of how being too aggressive can damage those relationships.
Right.
And actually limit your opportunities in the long run.
It's about finding that balance between staying connected and being respectful of people's time
Exactly.
and boundaries.
And remembering that networking is a marathon, not a sprint.
It's about building those relationships over time
Right.
and being there for each other through thick and thin.
And as those relationships deepen, you'll find that opportunities for collaboration, support, and even unexpected encounters will naturally come up.
Speaking of unexpected encounters, I loved how many sources talked about the importance of networking before you need to.
It's such a smart strategy.
When you glimpse your network, when you don't have something specific to ask,
Right.
you take the pressure off
Yeah.
and you can approach those connections with a more relaxed and open mind.
Exactly.
Plus, when you do need help or advice,
Yeah.
you already have a network of people who know you and your work.
It's like making deposits in a relationship bank account.
I like that.
You're consistently making an effort to connect, support, and offer value.
Right.
So when you do need something, you have plenty of resources to draw on.
And it's not always about asking for something.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just about having someone to bounce ideas off of,
Yeah.
get advice from,
Right.
or just someone to listen when things are tough.
Exactly. A strong network gives you more than just professional opportunities.
Yeah.
It also gives you emotional support and a sense of belonging.
It's like having a group of people who are rooting for you,
Yeah,
who have your back, and who want to see you succeed.
Exactly. And that feeling of community can be incredibly powerful.
So as we move into the final part of this deep dive,
Okay.
what are some key takeaways you want to leave our listener with about navigating this complex world of networking?
Well, Mike, one thing that came up a lot in our research was how technology has changed everything.
Oh, yeah.
For better or for worse.
Right. We have these amazing platforms like LinkedIn
Yeah.
that let us expand our networks way beyond our immediate circles.
It's like having this massive global directory of professionals at our fingertips.
Exactly. And it's not just LinkedIn. There are online communities, forums, and social media groups for every industry and interest.
It's incredible how much easier it is to find and connect with people who share our passions.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I think there's a risk that technology can make our interactions feel less real.
I agree. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers game.
Collecting connections without really taking the time to build relationships.
It's like we're sending out these generic connection requests.
Right.
Or spamming people with promotions without really trying to build rapport.
And that's where the art of online networking comes in. It's about using these platforms in a smart and intentional way.
So what are some tips for making real connections online without losing that authenticity?
One of the most important things is to personalize your outreach.
Yeah.
When you're connecting with someone on LinkedIn, for example, take the time to write a message
Okay.
that mentions something specific about their work or profile that you like.
Like a recent article they shared, a project they're working on.
Right.
Or even a connection you have in common.
Anything that shows you've taken the time to look at their profile
Yeah.
and understand who they are.
And once you're connected, don't just wait for them to reach out to you.
Right.
Engage with their content.
Yeah.
And comment on their posts.
Right.
And share articles or resources you think they might find helpful.
It's those little actions that show you're interested and keep you on their radar.
If you want to go even further, you could send a quick message thanking them for connecting.
Yeah.
Or mentioning something specific you found interesting about their work.
That's a great way to start a conversation and build a connection.
And don't be afraid to reach out to people you admire or who work in fields you're interested in.
Absolutely. You never know who might be open to a virtual coffee chat.
Yeah.
Or a quick phone call.
It's about being proactive and using these platforms to your advantage.
And remember, networking isn't just about finding mentors or jobs.
Right.
It's also about connecting with your peers, sharing ideas, and supporting each other's growth.
It's about building a community
Exactly.
of like-minded people.
Who can challenge you, inspire you, and celebrate your successes.
Exactly. And that feeling of community can be so valuable.
Absolutely.
So Sarah, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
what's one final piece of advice you'd give to our listener about networking, whether it's online or offline?
I would say embrace the power of connection.
Yeah.
Come to it with an open heart, a generous spirit, and a real curiosity for the people you meet along the way.
I love that.
You never know where those connections might lead
Right.
or how they might change your life.
Beautifully said, Sarah. You've given us so much to think about today.
It was my pleasure.
And remember, listeners, networking isn't just about what you can get.
Right?
It's about what you can get, what you can learn,
Yeah,
and who you can become through the power of human connection.
absolutely.
Now, what's one small step you can take today to start building those meaningful connections?
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Let us know in the comments below.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab for more deep dives on topics that matter.
Until next time, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep those conversations flowing. We've talked about the importance of genuine interest, finding common ground, and asking thoughtful questions. But let's get even more practical. What are some specific tips for making a lasting impression and nurturing those connections over time?
One thing that came up repeatedly is the power of follow-up.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds simple, but so many people drop the ball after an initial meeting.
It's like you go to a networking event, you meet a bunch of interesting people, you exchange business cards,
Right.
and then
Nothing. But following up promptly and meaningfully is so important.
Yeah.
It shows that you were paying attention, that you valued the conversation, and that you're serious about building a relationship.
So what does a good follow-up look like?
It doesn't have to be complicated. A simple email or LinkedIn message.
Okay.
Expressing your gratitude for the conversation
Yeah.
and mentioning something specific you discussed can go a long way.
For example, you might say something like, It was great to chat with you about Topic Epic. I'm particularly interested in learning more about specific area they mentioned.
Exactly. Or if they mentioned a challenge they were facing, you could offer a resource or connection that might be helpful.
It's about showing that you were listening and that you're genuinely interested in helping them.
And don't underestimate the power of a handwritten note.
Oh, yeah.
In today's digital world, a personal handwritten message can really stand out.
I love that idea. It's so thoughtful and unexpected.
It doesn't have to be a long, elaborate letter.
Right.
Just a few lines expressing your appreciation and referencing something specific from your conversation can make a big difference.
It's those little touches that show you're going the extra mile.
Right. You're not just going through the motions of networking.
You really care.
Exactly. You're being authentic and showing that you genuinely care about building a connection.
Another tip that I found helpful is to keep a networking journal
Oh, yeah.
or a spreadsheet where you jot down notes about the people you meet.
That's a brilliant strategy.
It can be as simple as their name, company, and a few key details about their interests or goals.
That way, when you follow up or see them again,
Right.
you can reference those details
Yeah.
and personalize your interaction.
Exactly. It shows
Yep.
that you were paying attention and that you value the relationship.
Right.
And it can be really helpful for remembering those little details that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Like their kids' names or a favorite hobby.
Those personal touches are what transform networking from a transactional exchange into a genuine connection.
So we've talked about following up and keeping track of our connections,
Right.
but how do we nurture those relationships over time?
One of the most effective strategies is to consistently provide value.
Okay.
This could involve sharing relevant articles, industry insights, or introductions to people in your network who might be helpful to them.
It's about being a resource, a
Right.
connector, somebody who's always looking for ways to help others.
And it's not just about offering professional support. It's
Yes,
also about being there for them on a personal level.
So checking in with them periodically, congratulating them on their successes,
Yeah.
or offering a listening ear during challenging times.
Exactly. It's those genuine acts of care and support that solidify those bonds and transform acquaintances into true friends.
And those friendships can often lead to unexpected opportunities down the line.
Absolutely. It's all about building those authentic connections, nurturing them over time, and seeing where they lead.
Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about some of the common networking mistakes people make.
Okay.
One thing that came up repeatedly was this idea of putting people on pedestals.
Ah, yes. The classic mistake of being so impressed by someone's title, accomplishments, or perceived status
Yeah.
that we lose sight of their humanity.
That way we forget that they're just people too.
Right.
With their own hopes, fears, and vulnerability.
And when we put them on a pedestal, it creates an imbalance in the interaction.
Yeah.
We come across as insincere or even desperate, which can actually hinder our ability to connect with them authentically.
So how do we avoid this crap?
It starts with recognizing that everyone, regardless of their achievements or status, deserves to be treated with respect
Right.
and humility.
It's about approaching every interaction as an opportunity to connect with another human being, not a title or a LinkedIn profile.
Right. And remembering that genuine connections are built on shared values, common interests, and mutual respect, not on hierarchy or perceived importance.
Another common mistake is being overly pushy or demanding.
Oh, yes.
The classic
Yeah.
hard sell approach.
It's like bombarding people with requests for favors, introductions, or advice without having established a genuine connection
Right.
or demonstrated a willingness to reciprocate.
And it almost always backfires.
People can sense when someone is just trying to use them,
Yeah.
and it can be a major turnoff.
It's about understanding that building trust and rapport takes time.
Yeah.
It's about focusing on nurturing those relationships, not on what you can get out of them.
One of the sources shared this anecdote about someone who was constantly hitting up their former boss for job referrals
Oh,
without ever really checking in or offering any help in return.
Right.
Eventually, that former boss just started avoiding them altogether. It's a perfect example of how being too aggressive can actually damage those relationships and limit your opportunities in the long run.
It's about finding that sweet spot between staying connected and being respectful of people's time and boundaries.
And it's about recognizing that networking is a marathon, not a sprint.
It's about building those relationships over time and being there for each other through both the good times and the bad.
And as those relationships deepen, you'll find that the opportunities for collaboration, support, and even serendipitous encounters will naturally arise.
Speaking of serendipity, I loved how many sources emphasize the importance of networking before you need to.
It's such a smart strategy.
By building your network, when you don't have a specific ask, you take the pressure off.
Right.
And can approach connections with a more relaxed and open mindset.
Exactly.
Plus, when you do need help or advice,
Yeah.
you'll have a network of trusted connections who are already familiar with you and your work.
It's like making deposits in a relationship bank account.
I like that.
You're consistently making efforts to connect support and offer value, so when you do need to make a withdrawal, you have ample resources to draw upon.
And those withdrawals don't always have to be transactional. Sometimes it's just about having someone to bounce ideas off of, get advice from, or even just offer a listening ear during challenging times.
Absolutely. A strong network provides not just professional opportunities, but also emotional support and a sense of belonging.
It's like having a tribe of people who are rooting for you, who have your back and who want to see you succeed.
Exactly. And that sense of community can be incredibly powerful.
So as we move into the final part of this deep dive,
Okay.
what are some key takeaways you want to leave our listener with about navigating this complex world of networking?
Well, technology has definitely changed the networking game.
Yeah, it's like a whole new world out there.
Right. We have these amazing platforms like LinkedIn that allow us to connect with people from all over the globe.
It's amazing to think about how much easier it is to find people who share our interests or career goals.
Yeah. But there's also a downside.
What do you mean?
It's easy to get caught up in the numbers, like collecting connections without really putting in the effort to build real relationships.
It's like we're just sending out these generic connection requests.
Right.
Or blasting everyone with promotional stuff without actually trying to connect.
Exactly. And that's where the art of online networking comes in.
So how do we use these platforms strategically?
Well, one of the most important things is to personalize your outreach.
Okay.
When you're reaching out to someone on LinkedIn, for example, take the time to write a message that mentions something specific about their work or profile that stood out to you.
Like a recent article they shared or a project they're working on?
Exactly. Or even a mutual connection you share.
It's all about showing that you've taken the time to actually look at their profile and understand who they are.
Right.
And once you're connected, don't just wait for them to reach out to you.
Exactly.
Engage with their content, like and comment on their posts.
Okay.
Share articles or resources that you think they might find valuable.
It's about staying top of mind.
Right.
And showing them that you're genuinely interested.
And if you really want to make an impression, you could send a short personalized message thanking them for connecting.
Oh, yeah.
Or mentioning something specific that you found interesting about their work.
It's all about starting a conversation and building that rapport.
And don't be afraid to reach out to people you admire.
Okay.
Or who work in industries you're curious about.
You never know who might be open to a virtual coffee chat.
Exactly.
Or a quick phone call.
Remember, networking isn't just about finding mentors or potential employers.
Right.
It's also about connecting with peers, sharing ideas, and supporting each other's growth.
It's about building a community.
Exactly.
Of like-minded people who can challenge and inspire you.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And that sense of community can be so valuable, both personally and professionally. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final piece of advice you'd give to our listener about networking?
I would say approach networking with an open mind and a genuine desire to connect with others. You never know where those connections might lead or how they might enrich your life.
That's great advice, Sarah. Thanks for joining me today.
It was my pleasure.
And listeners, remember, networking is about building relationships, fostering connections, and expanding your horizons. So get out there, be curious, be helpful, and watch your network flourish. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab for more deep dives on topics that matter. Until next time, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep those conversations flowing. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, your host, and today we're going to do a deep dive into a topic that is super important for better communication.
Okay.
Active listening. We've got a true expert in communication with us today. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Mike. Happy to be here.
Now, I think we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
You're talking to someone and you just know they're not really listening.
Yeah.
Like their eyes are glazed over or they're just waiting to jump in with their response before you've even finished your thought. It's like talking to a brick wall. But, active listening, it's about way more than just hearing the words.
Right.
It's about really understanding the speaker's full message, their feelings, their intentions, even the stuff they're not saying. So, Sarah, can you break that down for us a bit? What is active listening and why is it so important?
You're spot on, Mike. It's a whole different thing than just passively listening to words. It's about really being present and engaged with the person who's talking, not just waiting for your chance to jump in. It's about getting their message on all those levels. The words, of course, but also the emotions behind them, their body language, even their unspoken intentions. Like you're tuning into their whole being, not just their words. And it's so important for so many reasons, Mike. For one thing, it's like the foundation of any strong relationship, you know? When you actually practice active listening, you build that trust and respect with the other person. It shows them that you genuinely care about what they have to say, and you're really trying to understand their point of view. And that can make a huge difference, you know? Avoiding conflicts, building a good connection, and making your relationships with the people around you even stronger.
It really can. And it's not just personal relationships either, right?
No, not at all.
It's super important for work, too. Think about it. When you're in a meeting or you're negotiating something, or even just pitching an idea to your boss, being a good listener can really set you apart. It helps you get the information you need, understand everyone's point of view, and respond thoughtfully. Those are all such key skills for leadership and collaboration and, just being good at solving problems.
For sure. And it's funny because a lot of people just assume that listening is something we do naturally.
Yeah.
But being an active listener, it's a skill, something you can actually work on and get better at. It's like learning a language or playing a musical instrument. The more you practice, the better you get.
It's so true. And I remember when I first learned about active listening, I was blown away by this stat. Did you know that the average person only remembers like 25% what they hear after 2 months?
Really?
75% just goes in one ear and out the other.
Wow, that's wild. But it makes sense, right? When we really engage with information, when we consciously make that effort to listen and process it, our brains hold on to it better. Active listening techniques actually activate more areas of our brains.
Oh, interesting.
Which helps with memory and understanding. It's like giving your brain a workout. And we're not just talking about words here either. Remember, body language and all those nonverbal cues are a huge part of communication. Some research even suggests that over 65% of what we communicate isn't even spoken.
Wow. So if most of what we're communicating isn't even in the words themselves, active listening has to be about way more than just what we hear.
Exactly.
You've got to pay attention to the speaker's whole presence, their energy, everything.
Exactly. We need to be tuned in to all those subtle signals the speaker is giving us, both verbal and nonverbal. Their facial expressions, tone of voice, posture, even how they're using their hands. All those things give us these little insights into what they're really feeling and what they mean. It's like reading between the lines of the conversation.
Okay, I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do this? How do we get better at active listening? What are some things we can do?
That's the million-dollar question, right? The good news is anyone can improve their active listening skills. It's about being intentional about it and practicing. And like any skill, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Right.
So let's dive into some of those essential techniques.
Okay, lay it on us. What are your top tips for becoming a better active listener?
Okay, so first off, paying attention. It might seem obvious, but in this world of ours with distractions everywhere, it's actually harder than it sounds.
Oh, yeah.
Put your phone away, turn off those notifications. Find a quiet spot if you can. Make eye contact with the person who's talking and focus on what they're saying. Don't let your mind drift off and try to resist the urge to interrupt or plan what you're going to say next while they're still talking.
Okay, so put the phone down, close the laptop, be present in the moment. I think we could all use a reminder about that sometimes.
Definitely. Next up is showing that you're engaged. It's not enough to just be there.
Yeah.
You have to show the speaker that you're really listening and that you care what they have to say.
Right.
Nod your head, smile at the right moments, use little verbal cues like or I see to keep them going. It just lets them know you're with them and interested in what they're saying.
So it's like giving them little signals that you're on the same page.
Exactly. Those tiny cues make all the difference. And then there's providing feedback. This is where we take our listening to the next level. To make sure you're really understanding the speaker's message, try putting what you've heard into your own words.
Okay.
Say something like, so what you're saying is, or it sounds like you feel. This not only shows them you're paying attention, but also gives them a chance to make sure you've got it right.
So paraphrasing is like hitting the save button, making sure you've stored the information correctly.
Exactly. It helps both of you make sure you're on the same page. Another great technique is asking open-ended questions. This is about going beyond those simple yes or no questions and really inviting the speaker to go deeper into their thoughts and feelings. Try things like, can you tell me more about that? Or how did that make you feel? These types of questions show real interest and encourage the speaker to open up more.
Those open-ended questions are so important. It gives them the space to really unpack everything instead of just giving a surface-level response.
Absolutely. And maybe the most important one of all is withholding judgment. This means fighting that urge to jump in with solutions or force your opinions on them or give advice they didn't ask for. It's about making a safe space where they can share their thoughts and feelings without being judged or criticized. Sometimes people just need to vent or process their emotions, and the best thing you can do is just listen without trying to fix anything.
That is a big one.
Yeah.
It's so tempting to jump in with advice, especially when we care about the person who's talking.
Yeah.
But sometimes the best thing we can do is just listen with empathy and understanding.
Right.
Without judging. It's about truly seeing things from their perspective, even if we don't necessarily agree with them.
That's it. And that's often where people struggle, especially if they naturally like to problem solve or give advice.
Yeah.
But learning to hold back and just listen without judgment is one of the most valuable gifts you can give someone.
You're so right about that, Sarah. And I think this leads us perfectly into the next part of our deep dive. I'd love to hear an example of how this works in a real conversation.
Yeah.
Like, how do these techniques actually play out?
Absolutely. I'm happy to share an example. So picture this. Two friends, Lisa and Jody. Lisa's had a fight with her sister, and she's really upset.
Okay.
She calls Jody to talk about it. So Jody's going to use her active listening skills to be there for her friend.
Okay. I can picture this. Lisa's on the phone needing to vent about this family drama, and Jody's there to listen. What happens next?
So imagine Lisa says something like, I just had this huge fight with my sister and I'm so upset. She just blew me off when I tried to talk to her about planning our parents' anniversary party, and now I feel terrible.
Okay, so Lisa is clearly hurt and frustrated. It's Jody's time to shine as an active listener.
Exactly. Instead of jumping in with advice or opinions, Jody starts by simply acknowledging how Lisa's feeling. She might say something like, wow, that sounds really rough. You must be feeling so hurt and angry right now.
Okay, so right away, Jody is showing empathy and validating Lisa's feelings. She's not dismissing the situation or jumping to solutions. She's just letting Lisa know that she hears her and understands.
Yes, exactly. And that's so important. To encourage Lisa to share more, Jody then asks an open-ended question like, can you tell me more about what happened?
Okay.
This gives Lisa the space to explain everything in her own words and work through those emotions.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so tempting to jump in with our own thoughts and advice,
Yeah.
but sometimes the best thing we can do is create that space for the other person to tell their story.
You're spot on. And as Lisa's talking, Jody continues to show that she's engaged by making eye contact, nodding, and using those little verbal cues like, and I see to show she's following along.
Right.
These cues are so small, but so important. They show Lisa that Jody's present and really listening, even though she's not saying much. They create a sense of connection and support that's crucial in these kinds of conversations. Now, to make sure she's really understanding everything correctly, Jody uses paraphrasing. She might say something like, so it sounds like you're feeling hurt because your sister didn't seem interested in your ideas for the party, and it made you feel like your input wasn't valued.
Perfect. That's paraphrasing in action. It not only shows Lisa that Jody's listening, but it also gives Lisa a chance to correct Jody if she's missed something or misunderstood. This back and forth makes sure they're both on the same page.
Exactly. And that's a good place to take a pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground already. You know, from what active listening is to why it's so important to some of those essential techniques and even how they look in a real conversation.
Yeah, we have.
But we're just getting started. In the next part, we'll dive even deeper into the ins and outs of active listening. We'll explore some more advanced techniques and tackle some of the challenges that come up in those real-world conversations.
Can't wait to hear more. Stay tuned for part 2 of our active listening adventure. Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. We're picking up right where we left off, exploring the fascinating world of active listening with our expert, Sarah.
Right.
In part 1, we talked about what active listening is, why it's so important, but now I'm really keen to get into the how.
Okay.
Sarah, what are some more practical tips and techniques that we can use to really sharpen our listening skills and make those conversations we have every day more meaningful and have more impact?
You're absolutely right, Mike. Knowing the theory is great, but putting it into practice is where the real magic happens. So let's jump right into some more of those actionable strategies that you can start using today. One tip that might sound a bit counterintuitive at first is this. Don't just listen with your ears, listen with your whole body.
Okay.
What I mean by that is pay attention to your posture, your facial expressions, even your breathing. When you're truly engaged in a conversation, your body naturally reflects that. You tend to lean forward slightly, you make eye contact, and your facial expressions mirror the speaker's emotions.
But on the other hand, if you're bored or distracted, you might slouch across your arms or avoid eye contact. It's like your body is speaking a language of its own, and you want to make sure you're sending the right message.
That's such a great point. It's like we're sending these nonverbal signals all the time, whether we realize it or not. So we need to be mindful of our body language and make sure it's aligned with our intention to be present and engaged in the conversation.
Absolutely. And here's another interesting tip. Try to listen between the lines.
Okay.
Often what people don't say is just as important as what they do say. Pay attention to their tone of voice, their pauses, their body language. Are they hesitant to share certain details? Do they seem to be holding back their true feelings? Tuning into these subtle cues can give you valuable insights into the speaker's underlying emotions and intentions.
So it's almost like we're playing detective.
Yes.
Looking for those little clues in the speaker's behavior and trying to piece together the full story. Precisely. Active listening is about more than just taking words at face value. It's about reading between the lines and understanding the deeper meaning behind the message. And sometimes that means paying attention to what's not being said.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, what about those times when we're in a conversation with someone and we genuinely don't understand what they're trying to say? Maybe they're using jargon that we're not familiar with, or their explanation is just confusing.
Yeah.
What's the best way to handle those situations without interrupting the flow of the conversation or making the speaker feel like we're not paying attention?
That's a common challenge, and it's important to address it in a way that shows respect for the speaker. Instead of just nodding along and pretending you understand, don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions.
Okay.
You could say something like, "I'm not sure I follow you there. Could you explain that a bit more?" Or, "What do you mean by," and then repeat the specific term or phrase that you didn't understand.
So it's better to just pause for a moment and ask for clarification than to just fake it and risk misunderstanding the whole point of the conversation.
Exactly. It's about being honest about your understanding and taking the time to get on the same page as the speaker. And here's another tip for those moments when you need a little extra help processing what you're hearing. Try silently summarizing the speaker's key points in your own words. This helps solidify your understanding and can also help you formulate thoughtful questions or responses later on.
Okay, so it's like we're creating mental bullet points as we listen, highlighting the most important takeaways from the conversation.
Oh, no. It's about actively engaging with the information and making it your own.
Yeah.
Now, here's a tip that might seem small, but it can make a big difference in how you're perceived as a listener. Avoid finishing the speaker's sentences, even if you think you know where they're going.
Oh.
It can be tempting to jump in and try to speed things up, but it can also make the speaker feel like you're not really listening or that you're more interested in hearing yourself talk.
Oh, I am so guilty of this. Sometimes I think I do it because I'm eager to show that I'm following along and that I understand what they're saying, but I can definitely see how it could backfire and make the speaker feel rushed or cut off.
It's a common mistake, but it's definitely something to be mindful of. When you resist that urge to finish someone's sentence, you're giving them the space to express themselves fully and at their own pace, and that can make a world of difference in how heard and respected they feel.
Okay, that's a great reminder. Now, I'm curious about something. We've talked a lot about the verbal aspects of active listening, but what about the nonverbal side of things? How can we use our body language to show that we're truly listening and engaged?
Excellent question, Mike. Nonverbal communication is just as important as verbal communication, if not more so. It's often the key to building trust, conveying empathy, and creating a sense of connection with the speaker. So let's dive into some specific nonverbal techniques that can elevate your active listening game.
Awesome. I'm ready to take notes.
All right, here's a simple but powerful one. Make eye contact with the speaker. This shows that you're focused on them and interested in what they have to say. But a word of caution, don't stare them down. That can feel intimidating and unnatural. Instead, aim for a comfortable and natural level of eye contact that shows you're present without being overbearing.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where we're making eye contact enough to show we're engaged, but not so much that it feels creepy or uncomfortable.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding that balance that feels authentic and respectful for both of you. Now, here's another important nonverbal cue. Pay attention to your posture. Sit or stand up straight, but avoid being stiff or formal.
Okay.
Leaning forward slightly can show that you're interested and engaged, while leaning back can signal disinterest or boredom. And whatever you do, avoid crossing your arms.
Got it.
This can create a physical barrier between you and the speaker and make you seem closed off or defensive.
So it's about creating a welcoming and approachable presence with our body language, letting the speaker know that we're open to hearing what they have to say.
Right. It's about creating that sense of safety and trust that allows for open and honest communication. Now, here's a tip that might seem small, but it can actually make a big difference in how you're perceived as a listener. Nod your head occasionally. This simple gesture can go a long way in showing the speaker that you're following along and understanding their message. It's a nonverbal way of saying, yes, I'm with you, or I hear you.
It's like giving those little head nods of encouragement, like we're cheering the speaker on as they share their thoughts and feelings.
Yes, exactly. It's a subtle but effective way to show that you're present and engaged. And while you're at it, don't forget to smile. A genuine smile can create a warm and inviting atmosphere and make the speaker feel more comfortable and at ease. But again, be authentic. Don't force a smile if it doesn't feel natural. A forced smile can actually have the opposite effect and make you seem insincere or dismissive.
So it's all about being mindful of our body language and making sure it's congruent with our intention to be present, respectful, and engaged in the conversation.
Yes.
It's about sending those nonverbal signals that create a sense of connection and trust with the speaker.
You got it, Mike. It's about using our whole selves to listen, not just our ears. Now let's move on to a topic that's often misunderstood when it comes to active listening note-taking.
Okay.
Some people believe that taking notes is a sign of disrespect, or that it means you're not truly listening to the speaker. But that's not necessarily true.
Yeah, I've heard that before too. The idea that if you're busy scribbling away in your notebook, you must not be fully present in the conversation.
Right. But here's the thing. Taking notes can actually be a very effective way to enhance your active listening skills. If you're someone who struggles to remember details, taking notes can help you stay focused and retain information more effectively.
So it's like creating a written record of the conversation that we can refer back to later, almost like a mental map of the key points and takeaways.
Precisely. And it can be especially helpful in situations where you need to remember specific details, like in a meeting or a lecture. Now, of course, there's a right way and a wrong way to take notes while still being an active listener.
Right.
The key is to do it in a way that doesn't distract the speaker or make them feel like you're not fully present.
Okay, so how do we strike that balance?
Yeah.
How do we take notes effectively without sacrificing our active listening presence?
Here are a few tips. First, make sure you have the speaker's permission before you start taking notes. A simple, would it be all right if I jot down a few notes, can go a long way in showing respect and consideration. Second, don't try to write down every single word the speaker says. Instead, focus on capturing the key points, main ideas, and any action items or follow-up tasks. And third, make sure your note-taking doesn't interfere with your ability to make eye contact, nod, and use other nonverbal cues to show that you're listening. If you find yourself getting too caught up in writing, pause for a moment, look up at the speaker, and make sure you're still connected.
So it's about being strategic and selective with our note-taking, making sure it's enhancing our listening experience rather than detracting from it.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between capturing the essential information and maintaining that all-important human connection with the speaker.
Well said, Sarah. I think these note-taking tips are incredibly helpful. But before we move on, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, the idea of listening between the lines. Can you give us some more specific examples of what kinds of nonverbal cues we should be paying attention to and what they might mean?
Absolutely, Mike. It's like learning a secret code, decoding those subtle signals that people send through their body language and tone of voice. Let's break down some of the most common nonverbal cues and what they might reveal about the speaker's true feelings and intentions.
Okay, ready to crack the code.
Yeah.
What should we be looking for?
First up, we have eye contact. As we mentioned earlier, good eye contact is a sign of engagement and interest. But there's more to it than that. If someone is making strong, steady eye contact, it can also convey confidence, assertiveness, or even a desire to connect on a deeper level.
So strong eye contact can be a good thing. But what about the opposite? What if someone is avoiding eye contact altogether?
That's where things get a little more nuanced. Avoiding eye contact can signal a range of emotions, from shyness or nervousness to discomfort or even dishonesty. It's important to consider the context of the conversation and the speaker's overall demeanor to get a more accurate read on their true feelings.
Okay, so we need to be detectives using all the clues at our disposal to decipher the meaning behind the speaker's nonverbal cues.
Exactly. It's about being attuned to the subtleties of human behavior and understanding that there's not always a one-to-one correspondence between a specific cue and a specific emotion.
Got it. So what other nonverbal cues should we be paying attention to?
Let's talk about facial expressions. These are incredibly powerful indicators of emotion. A genuine smile can convey happiness, warmth, and approachability. A furrowed brow can signal confusion or concern, and a clenched jaw can betray anger or frustration.
So it's about paying attention to those micro expressions, those fleeting facial movements that can reveal a lot about what someone is truly feeling, even if they're trying to mask it.
You're exactly right. Our faces often betray our true emotions, even when we're trying to keep them hidden. And that's why it's so important to be attuned to those subtle facial cues.
Okay, so eye contact and facial expressions, check. What else should we be noticing?
Next up, we have tone of voice. This can be a powerful indicator of emotion and intention. A soft, gentle tone can convey empathy and understanding. A loud, forceful tone can signal dominance or aggression. And a wavering, uncertain tone can betray nervousness or lack of confidence.
So it's not just what people say, it's how they say it. The tone of voice can add layers of meaning to their words.
Precisely. It's like the soundtrack to a movie. It sets the mood and helps us interpret the action.
Okay, I'm getting the hang of this nonverbal decoding. What other clues should we be on the lookout for?
Let's talk about body language. This includes things like posture gestures and even the way someone is positioned in relation to you. For example, if someone is leaning in towards you, it generally signals interest and engagement. If they're leaning away or turning their body away from you, it could indicate disinterest, discomfort, or even a desire to end the conversation.
So it's about noticing those subtle shifts in body position and how they reflect the speaker's level of comfort and engagement in the conversation.
Exactly. And don't forget about gestures. These can be incredibly expressive and revealing. Open, expansive gestures can convey confidence, enthusiasm, or a desire to connect. Closed, restrictive gestures can signal defensiveness, anxiety, or even dishonesty.
So it's like our bodies are speaking a language of their own, and we need to learn how to interpret those nonverbal signals.
That's a great way to put it, Mike. It's about becoming fluent in the language of body language and understanding that it can often tell us more about a person's true feelings and intentions than their words alone.
This has been incredibly eye-opening, Sarah. I'm starting to see everyday conversations in a whole new light. Like there's this whole hidden layer of meaning that I've been missing out on. It's like upgrading our communication software, going from a basic version to the premium all-inclusive package.
I love that analogy, Mike. It's about expanding our awareness and becoming more attuned to the nuances of human interaction.
Well, Sarah, I have to say this deep dive into active listening has been a real game changer for me. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit of strategies for becoming a better listener and communicator.
Right.
But before we wrap up part 2 of our episode, I want to touch on something that I think is incredibly important, especially in today's world.
Okay, Mike, I'm intrigued. What's on your mind?
We live in a time where it feels like everyone is constantly shouting their opinions and trying to get the last word.
Yeah.
It's all about being right, being heard, and winning the argument. In that kind of environment, active listening can feel almost radical.
It can't. It's like swimming against the tide.
Exactly. But I think it's more important now than ever. If we want to bridge the divides between us, build understanding, and have more productive conversations, we need to reclaim the art of active listening.
You're absolutely right, Mike. Active listening is an act of courage in a world that often prioritizes noise over understanding. It's about choosing to listen, even when it's hard, even when we disagree, even when we'd rather just talk.
It's about creating that space for dialogue, for empathy, for genuine connection, even in the midst of all the chaos and noise.
Exactly. It's about remembering that listening is not a passive activity. It's an act of creation. It's about building bridges, fostering understanding, and co-creating a more compassionate and connected world.
Well said, Sarah.
Yep.
On that inspiring note, we'll wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into active listening. But don't go anywhere. In part 3, we'll explore the incredible benefits of active listening and how it can transform your relationships, your career, and even your own self-awareness.
Welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. We're wrapping up our exploration of active listening with Sarah.
Yeah. In the first 2 parts, we talked about what active listening is, why it's so important, and even got into some practical techniques for becoming better listeners.
Right.
But now I kind of want to shift gears a little and talk about the impact of active listening.
Yeah.
Like, what are the benefits we can expect to see when we really commit to this and become better listeners?
That's a great point. Mike, active listening isn't just about making other people feel good. Although it does do that, it also has this ripple effect, creating positive changes in our relationships, our work, and even our own self-awareness.
Okay.
Let's start with relationships. What's at the heart of any strong, healthy relationship? It's trust, understanding, and that feeling of being truly heard and seen. That's exactly what active listening does. When you practice active listening, you're basically sending this powerful message to the other person. You matter. Your thoughts and feelings are important to me. I'm here to listen without judging and to understand your perspective.
Yeah, it's like giving someone the gift of your undivided attention, which is so rare these days.
Yeah, it really is. It's about making the other person feel like they're the only person in the room, like their voice truly matters. And that creates this feeling of safety, connection, and intimacy that's essential for any strong relationship.
Right.
Whether it's with a partner, a family member, a friend, or even a colleague.
So active listening is like relationship superglue. It helps those bonds become stronger and more resilient. But I'm also curious about the impact of active listening on our professional lives. I know we touched on this a bit earlier, but can you talk more about how being a good listener can actually help us in our careers?
Of course. Active listening helps us build rapport, gather information effectively, and understand different perspectives. These are all such essential skills for effective leadership collaboration and problem solving. All things that are super valuable in any workplace.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you're truly listening to your colleagues, your clients, your boss, you're picking up on valuable insights that you might have missed otherwise. You're building trust and understanding, and you're showing them that you value their input. And that can make a big difference in how you're seen as a colleague, a team member, a leader.
So it's not just some fluffy, soft skill. It's like a secret weapon for success at work.
Exactly. And the best part, active listening is a skill that can be learned and developed just like anything else. It takes practice and intention, but the rewards are huge.
Totally. I'm sold on this.
Okay.
But, we've talked about how active listening benefits our relationships with other people. But what about our relationship with ourselves?
Oh, that's interesting.
Does active listening have an impact on our own self-awareness and personal growth?
That's a great question, Mike. And it's something that often gets overlooked. Active listening can be a really powerful tool for self-discovery and personal growth. Think about it. When we truly listen to others, we're exposed to different perspectives, different ways of thinking and feeling. We start to see the world through their eyes, and that can broaden our own understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.
It's like holding up a mirror to our own beliefs and assumptions and seeing them reflected back at us through the eyes of other people.
Exactly. We might realize that our perspective isn't the only valid one, that there are other ways of seeing things. And that can be incredibly liberating and eye-opening.
I can see that. By listening to others, we're not just learning about them, but we're also learning about ourselves.
Yes. And here's another way active listening helps with self-awareness. When we truly listen to others, we're also tuning into our own internal reactions. We're noticing how their words make us feel, what thoughts and emotions they trigger in us. And that helps us become more aware of our own emotional landscape, noticing those subtle shifts in our mood and how we're responding to the world around us.
It sounds like active listening isn't just about listening to other people, it's also about listening to ourselves. Cultivating that inner awareness that allows us to grow and evolve and become the best versions of ourselves.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Mike, active listening is a journey of self-discovery, both in terms of understanding the world around us and understanding our own inner world.
Well, Sarah, this has been an amazing deep dive into the world of active listening. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of just how powerful this skill is and how it can really transform our lives in so many ways.
Me too, Mike. It's been such a pleasure exploring this with you, and I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to embark on their own active listening journeys.
I'm sure they are, Sarah. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. And to our amazing listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into active listening. We hope you learned some valuable tips and techniques that you can start using today to improve your communication, strengthen your relationships, and maybe even boost your career success. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more communication tips and tricks. Thanks for tuning in. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and wow, are we in for a treat today. We're diving deep into something I think we all want more of in our lives. Those amazing, supportive, truly fulfilling friendships. And to help us get there, we've got the incredible Sarah joining us.
So happy to be here, Mike. You know, we talk a lot about romantic relationships, but friendships, they're really the key to a longer, healthier, and happier life, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just like a warm, fuzzy feeling. There's actual science behind it. Studies show that having strong social connections can actually cut our risk of dying early by like 50%. It's basically having this built-in team to help you through all of life's craziness.
It really is. And what's so cool is that those benefits, they're not just for your mental health. Having close friends, it actually helps your physical health too, you know? Less stress, a stronger immune system. It even helps you bounce back faster when you do get sick.
You know, it's funny, we kind of take friendships for granted sometimes. But seriously, think about it. Who do you turn to when you're celebrating something awesome? Or when you just need a shoulder to cry on? It's those friends, right? The ones who really matter.
It is those people. But I think it's important to separate those casual friends, you know, the people you just kind of know from those true friends. Because a true friend, they're not just someone who's fun to be around. They actually care about how you're doing and want the best for you.
Okay, so how can we tell the difference? What makes those ride or die friends so special?
Well, one of the biggest things is that they're genuinely interested in you, you know? It's not about waiting for their turn to talk, but actually wanting to hear about your hopes, your dream, even the stuff you're kind of afraid to share. It's about feeling like they see you, accept you for who you really are, quirks and all.
I get it. It's like they're your biggest cheerleader, but they're also not afraid to call you out when you're messing up, right?
Exactly. Being able to be vulnerable, without feeling judged, because opening up is scary, let's be honest. But research shows that sharing those personal struggles with a close friend, it actually makes the bond stronger.
You know what? I can totally relate to that. When I moved to a new city, I felt so lost, you know? But then I started hanging out with people from this hiking group and talking about our lives while we were out in nature. It really helped us become close friends fast.
There you go. That's a great example of how doing things together, sharing those experiences, it just creates this deeper connection, wouldn't you say?
For sure. So we know these true friends are super valuable, and being vulnerable helps build those bonds. But the big question is, how do we actually find these amazing people? It can feel pretty intimidating, right? Like, where do you even start?
You're telling me this whole modern world, it can make it harder to find those deep connections. But the good news is, it's not about luck. It's about making a conscious effort.
So we can't just sit back and hope for the best?
Nope, you gotta put yourself out there. Now, I know that might sound scary, but it doesn't mean you have to transform into this super social butterfly overnight.
So baby steps are okay.
Totally. Start small. If you're more on the quiet side, maybe just reconnect with an old friend. That could be a great first step. If you're naturally outgoing, just, pay attention to those moments when you feel a connection with someone. And then take a chance. See if you can turn it into something more.
That takes some pressure off. It's like recognizing those little sparks and then doing something to fan the flames. Right.
I like that. And the important thing is to be yourself, Authenticity, that's what attracts the right people. Share your real interests. Don't try to be someone you're not.
So be yourself, be open to trying new things, and take the initiative. Got it. But let's be real. Sometimes it feels awkward, putting yourself out there. Any advice on how to make it less, cringy?
You know what really helps? Being genuinely curious about other people. Ask questions, listen to their answers, and give them space to talk about themselves. Because let's be honest, people love talking about themselves, right? It makes them feel heard.
Oh, you know what? That reminds me of this thing I read. It said that talking about yourself, it actually activates the same pleasure centers in your brain as food. And get this, sex. So no wonder people enjoy it so much.
You're kidding. So asking questions and being a good listener, it's actually beneficial for both people. Win-win.
That's amazing. So be ourselves, be curious, look for those activities we can share with others. Those are great starting points. But what else can we do to, level up our friend-making game?
Sometimes it's those small, everyday moments that can make a difference. That smile you give a stranger, chatting with the barista, giving someone a genuine compliment, those little acts of kindness, they make you more approachable and might just open the door to a new connection.
I love that. It's like planting little seeds of connection everywhere we go. You never know what might grow.
Right, and sometimes those seeds, they sprout in the most unexpected places. I read this story about a guy who was new in town and felt super lonely, so he decided to walk his neighbor's dog. And that simple act, it led to him meeting all these new people and forming some really great friendships.
Wow, that's a great reminder that even the smallest actions can have huge results. It all starts with taking that first step, doesn't it?
It totally does. And once you've made those first connections, the real magic happens when you start nurturing those bonds. That's how we turn those acquaintances into true, lasting friendships.
Okay, so we've talked about why friends are so important, how to spot a true friend, and some ways to meet new people. But what about keeping those friendships strong, especially when life gets super busy? I feel like that's where things get tricky.
It definitely is. Life throws a lot our way, but don't worry, we've got you covered. When we come back, we're going to dive into the art of nurturing those friendships, so they don't just survive, but they actually thrive, even when things are crazy. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Learn English Lab. We're right in the middle of our deep dive into building those awesome friendships that make life better, more fun, and hey, we even learned they can make you healthier.
I'm so glad to be back, Mike. We've done some great work, right? Figuring out why friends are so important and how to start those first connections. But now let's switch gears a bit and talk about how to make those friendships last. That's the real challenge sometimes, wouldn't you say?
I think so. I mean, it's like anything you value, your garden, your car, heck, even a comfy pair of shoes. Got to give them some love and attention if you want them to stay in good shape.
Oh, I love that analogy because it's so true. Friendships, they're like any relationship. They need to be nurtured. Life gets in the way, we get busy, but those little things you do consistently, that's what really matters in keeping those bonds strong.
So give us the goods. What are some practical tips to make sure we're not accidentally ghosting our friends, even when our schedules are packed?
Okay, well, first off, regular check-ins, those are huge. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. Just a quick text to say, hey, thinking of you. Or a voice note sharing something funny that happened. Or even just calling them up out of the blue to see how their week's going. It shows you care, even when you're swamped.
Yeah, it's like saying, hey, you're still on my mind, even with all this craziness going on.
Exactly. Yeah. And don't forget about fun. Make time for those things we both enjoy, whether it's trying that new ramen place everyone's talking about, going to a concert, or even just having a movie night at home. Whatever floats your boat, it shows you're making the friendship a priority.
Makes sense. It's like actually putting it in your calendar, like you would a work meeting, but way more fun.
Exactly. And here's one that I think people often forget. Express appreciation. Those little acts of coldness, remembering what's important to them, actually telling them how much you value their friendship, that stuff goes a long way.
I know. It's funny how we just assume our friends know how we feel, but honestly, hearing those words out loud, it really can make all the difference. Like, I know when I get a heartfelt note from a friend, just appreciating something specific they see in me, it totally makes my day.
Doesn't it? Those little affirmations, they're so powerful. And it reminds me of the study I read. It showed that even small, unexpected gifts, like bringing your friend their favorite coffee or surprising them with a book you think they'd like, it can really strengthen that bond and make them feel super valued.
I love that. Those little I get you gestures, they mean so much. And speaking of going the extra mile, one of the articles we shared for this deep dive told this great story about two friends who lived in different countries. And they had this tradition of sending each other postcards whenever they traveled. Such a small thing, but those postcards, they became this symbol of their lasting friendship.
It's so true. Even when you're miles apart, those little efforts, they bridge the gap and show your friend they're important to you.
So we've got these awesome tools for keeping your friendship strong, those check-ins, fun times, expressing appreciation. But let's be real for a second. Even in the best friendships, disagreements happen, right? And can healthy friendships really survive those conflicts? Because honestly, sometimes it feels like walking on eggshells.
It's true. Disagreements are bound to happen in any close relationship. And healthy friendships, they're not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's about learning how to deal with it in a way that's actually constructive. Believe it or not, it can actually make the bond stronger if you handle it right.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I'm picturing those epic friend breakups you see in movies, and that's not exactly inspiring.
Right, but think about it. Haven't you had those arguments with friends where, even though it was tough in the moment, talking it through actually made your friendship stronger in the end?
Oh, totally. Like this one time, my friend and I had totally different ideas for a trip we were planning. We were both being super stubborn. But after some honest conversations, well, maybe a slightly heated debate, we actually found a compromise that worked for both of us. And you know what? Looking back, the trip itself was amazing, but what I really remember is how we learned to work through those differences.
That's it. That's a perfect example of healthy conflict resolution. It's about communicating respectfully, taking responsibility for your part, and really trying to understand each other's point of view instead of just trying to win the argument.
So it's less about being right and more about finding a solution that everyone can live with.
Exactly. And remember, sometimes it's okay to agree to disagree. Not every conflict needs a neat little resolution. The most important thing is to maintain that mutual respect and a willingness to move forward together.
This is great. We've talked about making those bonds stronger and handling those disagreements like champs. But there's another part of friendship that I think can be hard to talk about, you know? What happens when friendships just naturally drift apart? It's like that elephant in the room no one wants to acknowledge.
It is. It's one of those bittersweet things about friendship. But you know what? Sometimes it's perfectly normal for friendships to change and evolve. People grow, our lives change, and it doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong.
I think we put this pressure on ourselves to hold on to every friendship we've ever had. But it's like trying to squeeze into a pair of shoes that don't fit anymore. It's just not comfortable.
You nailed it. And forcing a connection that's not really there anymore, it's not authentic, it's not good for either person. It's okay to recognize that some friendships have a season, and that's all right. It doesn't take away from the value of the time you shared.
It's like those different chapters in a book, right? Some are full of action, some are more thoughtful and quiet, but they all make up the whole story.
Exactly. And by letting go of those friendships that aren't serving us anymore, it actually makes space for new connections to come into our lives. Connections that might be a much better fit for who we are now.
I like that. It's freeing in a way, right? Like giving yourself permission to go with the flow of friendships.
That's the spirit. And with that, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, wouldn't you say? We've explored how to nurture those friendships, how to handle those tricky disagreements, and even how to let go when it's time. Are you ready to move on to our last part, Mike, where we'll give our listeners some concrete things they can do to put all this into practice?
Welcome back to the Learn English Lab. It's been quite a journey, wouldn't you say? Exploring all the ins and outs of friendships. We've talked about the science behind why they're so good for us, the things that make a true friend stand out, how to make those bonds even stronger, and even how to deal with those, let's face it, inevitable disagreements that pop up sometimes.
It has been quite the journey. And now for the grand finale, we're going to give you some practical tools you can actually use to build and maintain those amazing connections. We've got all this knowledge, but what good is it if we don't know what to do with it, right?
It's like having a fancy new kitchen gadget, but no clue how to turn the darn thing on. So let's break it down. Where can our listeners start to actually put all these insights into action?
Well, we talked about putting ourselves out there, but let's get down to brass tacks. It really starts with being aware of what you're interested in, you know? Think about those passions, your hobbies, the things you've always wanted to try but haven't gotten around to yet.
Okay, so if I've always wanted to learn how to play the ukulele, I shouldn't just dream about it. I should actually sign up for a class.
You got it. Or maybe you're a totally bookworm. Joining a book club, that could be a great way to meet people who love reading just as much as you do. The point is, you got to create those opportunities to connect with people who share your passions.
Makes sense. It's all about finding your tribe, right?
Exactly. Having those shared interests, it just gives you something to talk about naturally, helps you build that connection. And don't limit yourself to just one thing. The more you explore, the more chances you have to meet people you really click with.
So, diversify our social portfolio.
I like it. And if the idea of walking into a room full of strangers makes you want to hide, there are other ways to connect online communities, forums, Facebook groups. Those can be a less intimidating way to start, especially if you're more on the introverted side.
That's good to know. It takes the pressure off, right?
For sure. And honestly, you never know where those meaningful connections are going to come from. I read this story about this woman who started volunteering at an animal shelter, and she ended up becoming really close friends with the other volunteers. That shared love for animals, it turned into something really special.
That's so cool. It just goes to show, even those unexpected places can lead to amazing friendships. Got to be open to those possibilities.
Right. And volunteering in general, it's a fantastic way to give back and meet people who care about the same things you do, Whether it's a food bank, mentoring kids, environmental stuff, there's something for everyone.
Awesome. So you found something you enjoy doing, you're putting yourself out there, and you've met some cool people. Now what? How do you go from those initial hellos to a real solid friendship?
That's where all that nurturing stuff comes in. We talked about those regular check-ins, scheduling fun things to do together. But it's more than that. It's about being genuine, being the kind of friend you'd want to have.
So treat others how you want to be treated. The golden rule of friendship.
Pretty much. Be a good listener, be there for them when they're going through tough times, celebrate their successes like they're your own. Remember those important dates and milestones, all those little things. They show you really care about the friendship.
It's funny how those little things can make such a big difference, right? Like, I remember this one time, a friend brought me my favorite takeout after I had a really rough week. It wasn't anything crazy, but it meant the world to me because it showed they were paying attention and actually cared about how I was feeling.
Exactly. Those small acts of kindness, they say a lot. They show your friend that there was just some afterthought, when you're busy with everything else.
It's like saying, hey, you matter to me even when life's chaotic. But speaking of chaotic, how do we manage to make time for friends when we've got work, family, all that stuff going on? It's a constant battle.
Oh, I know. You got to be intentional about it, But one thing that can help is trying to include your friends in your everyday routines instead of always trying to plan these big elaborate outings. Invite a friend to join you for your morning walk or suggest trying a new workout class together,
So find those pockets of time and be creative with how we connect.
That's it. Doesn't have to be a big production every time. Even just grabbing coffee or a quick phone call can do wonders for staying connected.
Makes sense. It all adds up, right? Those little moments keep the friendship going. But even with the best intentions, sometimes disagreements are going to happen. We talked about navigating those conflicts. Any other tips for dealing with those tricky situations?
The key is to approach those conflicts wanting to understand, not to blame, Check your ego at the door and really listen to what the other person is saying.
So it's a we're in this together kind of thing, not you versus me.
Exactly. And communicate. Don't let things fester. If something's bothering you, say it. Calmly and respectfully, of course, focus on how you feel instead of attacking the other person.
That's good advice. But what if you've tried to communicate, but the same issue keeps coming up?
That's when you might need to have a deeper conversation about the friendship itself. Be honest about what you need and what you expect from the friendship. And be open to hearing their side of things too. Sometimes giving each other honest but kind feedback can actually change the dynamic for the better.
I see your point. But what if even after all that, the friendship still feels kind of, one-sided, like you're always the one reaching out or offering support?
That's a tough one, and it takes a lot of self-awareness to recognize when that's happening. Sometimes, even if you've tried your best, a friendship might have just run its course, and that's okay. It's okay to let go gracefully, cherish those memories, but make space for new connections that might be a better fit for you right now.
I think that's important to remember. Friendships, they're like any relationship. They change over time. Sometimes they get stronger. Sometimes they naturally fade. And that's all right. It's all part of life, right?
It really is. And the beautiful thing about friendship is that it's a two-way street. Just like we need to be mindful of who we surround ourselves with, we also got to strive to be a good friend to others, right?
It's about pulling your own weight, being supportive, trustworthy, showing up authentically. It's not just about what you get, but what you give too.
That's the heart of it, being the best version of ourselves so we can have a positive impact on the people around us.
Wow, this has been such an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for being here with us at the Learn English Lab, Sarah. I feel like I've learned so much about the power of friendship.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
And to all you amazing listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into friendships. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We'll catch you next time on the Learn English Lab. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're diving deep into American English listening practice.
Oh, cool.
And to help guide us through this, we have Sarah, a seasoned English language expert.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here, Mike. I'm excited to sort of explore the intricacies of American culture and how that all ties into communication.
When people think about American culture, the first thing that pops into their mind is its incredible diversity, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's this melting pot of just tons of different cultures and backgrounds.
Absolutely. And, that's what makes it so awesome and so lively for language learning. But also at the same time, it can be a little bit overwhelming. With all the different accents and dialects and slang, it can be a lot for someone who's new to American English.
Right. And it's crazy to think over 350 languages are spoken in the U.S. Obviously, Spanish is a major one, but there's just a huge range of languages from all over the world.
It really speaks to, the history of the U.S. as like a global destination for immigrants. And it's not just the number of languages, but how they've all kind of blended and influenced American English over time. You hear it in the vocabulary and the grammar, the rhythm and intonation of different regional dialects.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like that. I bet recognizing these subtle influences from different language families can be a real game changer for someone trying to improve their listening comprehension.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For example, if someone's familiar with Spanish, they might notice certain patterns in how a native Spanish speaker pronounces English words. And that can really help them understand what they're hearing.
So we've talked about like the diversity of languages, but what about the values that kind of like shape American culture? How do those values kind of come through in everyday communication?
Yeah, that's a great point. To really get American English, you got to look beyond just the words themselves and think about the cultural context. Values like freedom, equality, individualism, materialism, and the pursuit of happiness, these are really deep in the American mindset, and they influence the way people express themselves.
I can totally see how that plays out. Like the emphasis on individualism probably explains why Americans are so direct in their communication style. Right?
Exactly. And the value placed on, the pursuit of happiness could explain that American optimism, the can-do spirit, even when things are tough. It's almost like these values are just bubbling beneath the surface of every American conversation, even if they're not saying it outright.
And we can't forget that like strong emphasis on hard work and education in American culture. These topics come up everywhere, whether you're watching the news, listening to something, or just talking to someone at a coffee shop.
For sure, the concept of the American dream, achieving success through hard work and determination, it's a strong cultural narrative here. And then you have these prestigious universities like Harvard or Stanford. They're seen as symbols of achievement and upward mobility. And you often hear them mentioned in conversations about careers, success, and even personal identity.
This is all so interesting. But can we maybe change gears for a second? Let's talk about something a bit more fun. Let's dive into American pop culture. You can't really imagine American culture without music, right? Jazz, rock and roll, hip-hop, pop country, these have had a massive impact globally. And they've definitely shaped how Americans use language.
Oh, 100%. American music is like a little snapshot of the country's diverse influences, and its impact on language is undeniable. Think about how often you hear expressions like feeling blue or hitting a high note. These are taken directly from music.
And then there's Hollywood. Blockbuster movies, hit TV shows, celebrity culture. It's all part of American culture. It has to influence slang and everyday expressions.
Absolutely. Hollywood plays a huge role in shaping how Americans talk, think, even dress. Movie quotes, catchphrases, they just slip into everyday conversation. And then you've got social media where celebrities and influencers are always coming up with new slang terms and trends that catch on super fast.
What about American cuisine? It's such a mix of flavors and traditions, from classic comfort food like burgers and hot dogs to regional specialties like Tex-Mex or Southern soul food. Food's such a window into a culture.
Right. Food is a big part of American culture, and it's a conversation starter. People love to talk about their favorite restaurants, argue about the best way to cook something, or just share a meal together. Just like with music, different regions have their own distinct food cultures and vocabulary, so if you hear someone talking about grits or gumbo or clam chowder, you can kind of guess where they might be from.
Okay, so we've covered music, movies, and food. But what about holidays? They're a big part of American life, and they give you insights into the country's values and traditions. We have Thanksgiving, Independence Day, Christmas, and even some uniquely American holidays like Memorial Day.
Totally, holidays are more than just days off in the U.S. They're times for families and communities to come together, celebrate shared values, and make memories. Each holiday comes with its own traditions, vocabulary, and topics of conversation. Understanding these can really deepen your understanding of American culture.
And what about everyday life in America? I imagine things like etiquette, social norms, even those unspoken communication cues can be tough for someone new to the culture, like respecting privacy, tipping, appropriately waiting your turn in line. These are all super important in America.
You got it. Mastering these unspoken rules of American etiquette can make a huge difference in how smoothly you navigate social situations. It shows respect for the cultural norms of the country.
And finally, let's touch on those iconic American symbols like the U.S. flag, the Statue of Liberty, the bald eagle. They're more than just images. They represent deeper values and historical stories that are woven into American identity.
Absolutely. Understanding the symbolism behind these iconic images can give you a much deeper appreciation for American culture and the values it represents. They offer a glimpse into the country's history, its struggles, and its aspirations.
This has been a really insightful conversation so far, Sarah. It feels like we've just scratched the surface, though.
I agree. There's so much more to explore when it comes to American culture and how it affects the language.
Well, we've got more coming up, so stick with us. So, Sarah, we've talked about some of the broader aspects of American culture, but for our listeners, how can they really immerse themselves in this environment and improve their listening skills?
Yeah, I think the key is to actively engage with American culture, not just watch it from a distance. And there's so many fun and easy ways to do that. For starters, make American media your go-to. Movies, TV shows, YouTube videos, those are all great resources.
Yeah, I could see how that'd be helpful. But I'm guessing it's not just about watching right. It's about actively listening and trying to pick up on those nuances we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Don't just passively absorb the content. Engage with it. Pay attention to the dialogue, the accents, the slang, the humor. Pause, rewind, repeat. Take notes on new words or expressions you hear. The more you actively engage, the better you'll understand those American speech patterns.
How about music? We talked about how influential American music is worldwide. But how can people use it to improve their listening comprehension?
Music is so powerful for language learning because it combines rhythm, melody, and lyrics in a way that makes language memorable. Start by exploring different genres of American music. Find songs you enjoy, read along with the lyrics, and try to figure out the themes, emotions, and cultural references in the music. And don't be afraid to sing along. It's a great way to improve your pronunciation and rhythm.
I've heard that podcasts could be really good for English learners, too. What do you think about that?
Podcasts are amazing. You can find podcasts on almost anything, and they expose you to a ton of accents, speaking styles, and vocabulary. Plus, because podcasts are only audio, they force you to focus on your listening.
What about reading? I'm assuming that's also important for listening skills, even though it's not directly related to listening.
Oh, reading is super important for building vocabulary, improving grammar, and understanding sentence structure. But to connect reading to listening, try reading out loud. Pay attention to the rhythm, intonation, and pronunciation of the words. You can even record yourself and then listen back to see where you can improve.
So we've got movies, TV, music, podcasts, and reading. Any other strategies listeners can use to enhance their American English listening skills?
Well, nothing beats real-life conversation. If you know any native English speakers, whether it's through friends, colleagues, or language exchange partners, take advantage of those opportunities to practice.
What if someone doesn't have access to native English speakers in their everyday life? Are there any online resources they can look into?
Absolutely. There are so many platforms now where you can connect with native speakers for language exchange, join virtual conversation groups, or even take online tutoring sessions. It's all about finding chances to interact with real people and get comfortable with the natural flow of conversation.
It's important to remember that making mistakes is a normal part of learning, right?
100%. Don't let the fear of messing up hold you back. Actually embrace those mistakes. Every mistake is a chance to learn and grow.
That's a great mindset. It's easy to get discouraged when you're learning a new language, but remembering that mistakes are part of the journey can make a big difference.
Totally. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and don't be afraid to laugh at your mistakes along the way. Learning a language should be fun, not a chore.
Okay, so we've talked about cultural immersion and given a bunch of tips for improving listening skills. But before we wrap up, I want to talk about another big part of listening comprehension, and that's active listening.
Great point. Active listening is super important, especially when it comes to American English. It's not just about hearing the words. It's about really engaging with the speaker, paying attention to their verbal and nonverbal cues, and asking questions when you need to.
So it's not just about understanding the words themselves, but about understanding the meaning behind them, picking up on the nuances, and understanding the context.
Right. Active listening means paying close attention to the speaker's tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language. These nonverbal cues can tell you a lot about the speaker's emotions, intentions, and even their hidden message.
That makes sense. You can say the same sentence in so many different ways, and the meaning can totally change depending on your tone of voice or her facial expression.
Exactly. Active listening is all about picking up on those subtle layers of communication that go beyond the literal words being spoken.
So for our listeners who are working on improving their American English listening comprehension, what are some active listening techniques they can practice?
Here are a few tips. First, minimize distractions and focus on the speaker. Make eye contact and show them that you're fully engaged in the conversation. Second, pay attention to nonverbal cues like facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice. These can often provide clue about the speaker's true meaning. Third, don't be afraid to ask questions if you're not sure about something. It shows that you're really listening and want to understand what they're saying. Fourth, try to summarize or rephrase what you've heard to make sure you got the main points. This helps you understand better and shows that you're actively listening. And finally, be patient. Active listening takes time and effort, so be kind to yourself and let the conversation happen naturally.
Those are great tips, Sarah. Active listening is definitely a skill that takes practice, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. Active listening is the foundation of good communication, and it's a skill that will help you in all parts of your life, both personally and professionally.
Well, Sarah, this has been a really insightful deep dive into American English listening practice. You've given our listeners so much valuable information and advice. I've learned a lot myself.
It's been a pleasure, Mike. I always enjoy sharing my love for language and culture.
And for our listeners out there, keep practicing, stay curious, and don't let those mistakes get you down. Remember, learning English is an adventure, and every step you take gets you closer to fluency.
And don't forget to have fun along the way.
Absolutely. Learning a language should be an enriching and enjoyable experience. So embrace the challenges, immerse yourselves in American culture, and keep your ears open for all the amazing sounds and expressions you'll come across.
And one last thing, Mike.
Of course, what's that?
If our listeners are enjoying this deep dive, we'd love for them to share and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel for more episodes like this one.
That's right. We have so much more content coming, so hit that subscribe button and join our community of English learners from around the world.
See you in the next episode.
Happy listening. You know, we've talked about active listening as a key skill, but I think there's another piece to this listening comprehension puzzle we haven't really touched on yet, and that's critical thinking.
Oh, for sure. Critical thinking is so important for really understanding and evaluating what you hear, especially now when information's coming at us from all sides.
Yeah, it feels like we're constantly bombarded with messages from the news, social media advertising, even just casual conversations. How can we sort through all that and figure out what's actually worth paying attention to?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in. It's not just about absorbing information passively. It's about questioning what you hear, analyzing the source, looking at the evidence, and forming your own informed opinions.
So it's not about blindly believing everything we hear, but about digging deeper and thinking for ourselves.
Exactly. Critical thinking means asking questions like, who's giving me this information? What's their perspective or agenda? Do they have evidence? What are some other viewpoints I should think about?
That's so crucial, especially with news and current events. There's so much bias and misinformation out there.
Totally. It's so important to be smart about the information we consume. Don't just accept things at face value. Do your own research, double-check facts, and be careful of those sensational headlines or emotional language.
And I bet critical thinking is important, not just for understanding the news, but for everyday conversations too.
Absolutely. Critical thinking helps you understand those subtle cues we talked about, like tone of voice, body language, and implied meaning. It's about reading between the lines and getting what's not being said directly.
That makes a lot of sense. So for our listeners who want to improve their critical thinking skills, what are some practical things they can do starting today?
Let me think. First question, everything. Don't just take things for granted. Be a little skeptical and ask questions about the information you come across. Second, think about the source. Who's providing the information? What's their background and expertise? Are they credible and trustworthy? What might be motivating them or influencing their viewpoint? Third, look for evidence. Are there facts, statistics, research to support what they're saying? Is the evidence solid, and can you check it? Fourth, be aware of potential biases. We all have biases, whether we realize it or not. Try to spot any biases in the information you're taking in. Fifth, get different perspectives. Don't just rely on one source. Gather various viewpoints to get a broader understanding of the topic. And lastly, be open to changing your mind. Critical thinking involves being willing to shift your opinions when you see new evidence or hear different perspectives.
Those are really helpful tips. Critical thinking definitely takes practice, but it's so important for navigating our complicated world, especially when trying to understand other cultures and perspectives.
I totally agree. And the great thing is, the more you use critical thinking, the easier it gets. It's like a muscle that gets stronger the more you work it.
Well, Sarah, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into American English listening practice. We've covered so much today, from pronunciation and grammar to cultural communication and critical thinking. I'm sure our listeners are well prepared to handle any listening challenges they come across.
It was my pleasure, Mike. To our listeners, remember, learning a language is a journey. Stay curious, keep practicing, and don't be afraid to try new things and immerse yourselves in American culture.
And everyone, don't forget, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please like, share, and subscribe to the Learn in This Lab YouTube channel for more episodes like this.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Happy listening. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and wow, I'm so excited for this deep dive. We're going to be talking about how to describe your ideal day, in English. Not just learning the vocabulary, but really getting to the heart of what makes you happy. And to help us unpack all of this, we have the amazing Sarah, our language expert.
I'm so happy to be here, Mike. It's going to be a great episode.
So before we jump into the specifics of how to describe a whole day, what even is an ideal day, right? Is it like a checklist of activities or is it more of a feeling? What do you think?
It's a good question, and it's tempting, I think, to go straight to those activities, but an ideal day is really personal. It's unique to you or to me. It's more about how you feel. Like at the end of the day, happy, fulfilled, at peace, that kind of thing, more than the actual things that you did.
Oh, okay. So it's not necessarily about forcing myself to go for a run, but more about the energy and the sense of accomplishment I feel after I finish the run.
Exactly. Someone else might feel that way after they curl up with a good book. It's all about what brings you joy, listener. So take a moment before we go any further and just think about that. What does ideal actually mean for you personally?
Yeah. It's so easy to get caught up in what we think we should want, not what actually makes us happy.
That's so true. But that's where the magic happens, when we actually focus on what makes us happy.
Okay, so our listeners have thought about that a little bit. Now, how do they go about describing a whole day in English? It seems like a lot to put into words.
Yeah, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But having a structure can really help. So think about it like the flow of the day. You start with the morning, then you move to the main activities that you would do. Maybe consider meals and breaks, and then how you would wind down at the end of the day in the evening.
Okay, I like that. It's kind of like building a story scene by scene.
Yeah.
So let's walk through that a little bit. So starting with the morning, how would your perfect morning unfold? What time were we waking up? And what's the first amazing thing you do when you wake up?
Okay, well, for me, I would wake up naturally. No alarm clock. Maybe 7 or 8 o'clock when the sun is just starting to peek in through the windows. And I would throw open those windows and let in the fresh air, and the birds are singing.
Oh, that already sounds so peaceful. I can feel a gentle breeze.
And listener, there's no right or wrong answer here. Maybe you're up before the sun, hitting the gym, or going for a run. Or maybe it's a slower start, like a slow breakfast, reading the news, and sipping some coffee as you ease into the day.
Yeah. It's those personal touches that make it special. Instead of just coffee, it's you're savoring the perfect cappuccino with almond milk or whatever your favorite is.
Exactly. Those details make your description come alive and help people really understand what makes this day so special for you.
Okay, so we've got the morning routine down. Now what? What are those key activities that would make this day truly stand out?
Okay, now's the time to let your imagination go wild. Spending time with your loved ones, diving into a hobby that you're passionate about, or maybe going on some kind of adventure that gets your adrenaline pumping.
Yeah, for all of our listeners who love the outdoors, maybe it's hiking to a stunning view or kayaking on a peaceful lake.
Exactly. And for those who are more creative, maybe it's painting a masterpiece or writing a story or composing some music. The possibilities are endless.
And it's not just the activity itself, right? It's about how you describe it.
Yeah.
So instead of saying I would go kayaking, it's I'd glide across the mirror-like surface of a lake, surrounded by the beauty of nature.
Yes, Mike. That descriptive language really paints a picture and brings that day to life for whoever's listening.
And I think it's important to say that an ideal day doesn't have to be packed with activities.
Right.
Part of it could just be being relaxing and soaking in the present moment.
Oh, absolutely. Rest and relaxation are just as important as any other activity. It's about finding a good balance.
Now, I don't know about you, Sarah, but no ideal day for me is complete without some amazing food. So where does food fit into all of this?
Ugh, the culinary delights. This is another chance to really tap into those sensory details. Are we talking about a home-cooked meal? Or going to a cute little restaurant? Or packing a picnic basket and enjoying your meal in nature?
Ooh, a picnic sounds nice. I can picture it. A checkered blanket under a shady tree, sun on my face, the smell of fresh bread and fruit in the air.
I love it. You see how those details make it come alive? It's about that full experience, not just eating.
All right, so we've had an amazing morning, we've done our activities,
Yeah.
and we've had some great food. Now it's time to wind down. How does your ideal day come to a close? What's that perfect evening routine?
Well, for me, it would be something calming and restorative, like reading a good book by the fireplace, maybe taking a bath, or just spending time with family, sharing stories and laughter.
That sounds so nice. For others, it might be a little bit more entertaining, like watching a movie under the stars or going to a concert.
Yeah, anything that brings you joy as you get ready to go to sleep.
Speaking of sleep, I am feeling relaxed. Just talk about all of this. But before we drift off to dreamland, we have to talk about something.
Oh, really? What's that?
Well, it's the power of language. We've been hinting at it throughout this conversation, but how important is it to use really descriptive language when you're describing your day?
Oh, it's so important, Mike. Descriptive language is what makes your ideal day come alive for other people. It's what turns a simple sentence like, I went to the beach, into a more captivating experience. Like, I spent a relaxing day at the beach listening to the soothing sound of the waves crashing on the shore.
Wow, you just transported us there. I can feel the sand between my toes and smell the salty air.
Exactly. Vivid adjectives, evocative verbs, sensory details, they all come together to create that immersive experience.
So how can our listeners start building their descriptive vocabulary? Any tips for making those words stick?
One really good way is to just be more mindful of the language you encounter every day. Like, pay attention to how authors or speakers or even your friends use words to create those images and feelings.
So it's like turning your everyday life into a little language lesson.
Precisely. You could also keep a vocabulary journal. Write down new words and phrases and their definitions, and maybe try using them in some sentences.
That's a good tip. And I bet that making flashcards or using those words in conversation with a friend or language partner can really help solidify them.
Absolutely. The more you actively engage with new vocabulary, the more natural it's going to become.
Okay, so we've given our listeners some strategies for improving their language skills.
Yeah.
Now, I'm kind of craving a concrete example. Can we look at a sample ideal day description and see how all these elements come together?
I would love to. Let's take a look.
Okay, so this example starts with the morning. And wow, they really set the scene. They talk about waking up feeling refreshed and full of energy, and that already tells us so much about the day's tone.
It does. And they go on to talk about opening their windows, letting in the fresh air and sunlight, and then they describe having a light breakfast, like toast with jam and fruit. All of these details create such a sense of peace and tranquility.
And the imagery continues as they describe going for a walk in the park. They talk about how the weather is perfect, how the trees are green, the flowers are blooming. They even bring their camera to capture the beautiful scenery.
And later they describe their afternoon at the beach. I love how they include that sensory detail of the soothing sound of the waves. It's like we can hear it ourselves.
It's so evocative. And they blend activities with feelings really well. They mention spending time with their best friend at a cozy cafe, laughing for hours, sharing stories. It's not just about the place, but about the emotional connection.
It shows how shared experiences contribute to their happiness.
And as the day goes on, they also include creative activities, like painting or writing. They talk about how these activities let them express themselves and their creativity. It's just a really well-rounded picture of a perfect day.
It really is. They've done such a good job of bringing together activities, feelings, and sensory details.
And I love how they end the day with a peaceful evening routine, spending time with family, reflecting on the day, and practicing gratitude. It's a beautiful way to end the day.
It really is. This example just shows us how to describe an ideal day using vivid language and thoughtful details.
But remember, listeners, this is just one example. Your ideal day will be unique to you. It'll reflect your passions, your values, and your dreams. Don't be afraid to let your personality shine through.
There's no one right way to envision your perfect day. The most important thing is that it resonates with you.
Okay, so we've seen a fantastic example. But before we unleash our listeners to create their own descriptions, I want to give them one more little boost, a vocabulary power-up.
Ooh, I like that idea. A vocabulary boost can help our listeners express their day with even more detail.
Exactly. And we have a handy list of words and phrases that we can share, conveniently organized by time of day or type of activity.
Fantastic. A thematically organized list makes it so much easier to learn and apply new vocabulary.
So for our early birds who are all about that morning routine, we have words like sunrise, fresh, peaceful, energizing, breakfast, tea, coffee, exercise, walk, and yoga.
And for those whose ideal day is a little bit more adventurous, we have words like relaxing, exciting, creative, adventurous, fun, enjoyable, fulfilling, and meaningful.
I'm feeling inspired already. And of course, we can't forget about food. For our foodies out there, we have words like delicious, tasty, homemade, fresh, healthy, sweet, savory, cozy restaurant, and picnic.
What a great list. And as we move into the evening, we have words like sunset, calm, quiet family friends, movie book, music reflection, and gratitude.
Those words just evoke such a sense of peace. And finally, to capture that overall feeling of the day, we have words like happy, relaxed, joyful, content, peaceful, excited, fulfilled, and grateful.
What a wonderful collection of words.
It's like a treasure trove of language.
Yeah.
And remember, listeners, this is just a starting point. Don't be afraid to use a dictionary or a thesaurus, or look online for more words and phrases that resonate with you.
The more you explore, the more you'll discover the richness and the nuances of the English language.
So we've covered a lot today. From defining what an ideal day means, to exploring descriptive language and giving you a vocabulary boost. But there's one question we haven't answered yet.
What's that, Mike?
How can our listeners actually practice describing their ideal day in English? It's one thing to have all these great words and ideas in your head, but how do we put them into practice?
You're so right. Practice is essential for learning any language. It helps us learn new vocabulary, become more fluent, and build our confidence.
So let's brainstorm some fun ways to practice. What are your top tips?
Well, one of the simplest and most effective ways is to just write it down. Take some time to craft a detailed description using all of the language that we've talked about.
So it's like creating your own little blueprint for happiness. And don't worry about making it perfect. Just focus on getting your ideas down.
And once you've written it down, you can practice speaking it out loud. This will help you refine your pronunciation and get more comfortable using those new words and phrases.
If you're feeling brave, you can even record yourself speaking and listen back to it.
That's a good idea. Listening back to yourself can be really helpful for noticing any patterns in your pronunciation or any areas where you might be stumbling over certain words.
And why not share your ideal day description with a friend or family member or language partner? You can get feedback on your language skills, and you might even get some inspiration from hearing how others describe their ideal days.
I love that idea. It's a great way to connect with others and learn from each other.
And don't forget about visuals. If you learn best by seeing things, try drawing or finding pictures that represent your ideal day and use those as prompts to help you describe it.
Visual aids are a great way to trigger your imagination and memory.
So there you have it, listeners, a whole bunch of strategies for practicing your ideal day description and improving your English.
The most important thing is to have fun and be creative. Don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you.
Well, that brings us to the end of part 1 of our deep dive into describing your ideal day. We've covered a lot, but there's still so much more to explore.
We'll be back with part 2 soon.
Until then, keep dreaming big. Keep practicing and keep those language skills shining.
Welcome back to the Learn English Lab. We're diving even deeper today into how to describe your ideal day and how to really make those descriptions fantastic.
You know, Sarah, when we were talking earlier, I was thinking about something interesting about this whole idea of an ideal day. It's not just about practicing English, it's also a really great way to learn more about yourself.
I completely agree. When we think about our perfect day, we're really revealing our values, our priorities, the things that are important to us.
It's like we're looking in a mirror. And by putting those thoughts into words, we're not just improving our language skills, we're also understanding ourselves better.
Exactly. And that understanding can help us make better choices in our everyday lives.
I love that. Okay, so describing an ideal day is a fun way to practice English, and it's also a really meaningful way to learn about ourselves. But let's get back to some practical tips. Last time we talked about descriptive language. Can we go into a little more detail about that? What are some specific things our listeners can do to make their descriptions really stand out?
One really powerful technique is to use all 5 senses. Don't just describe what you would see, but also what you would hear, smell, taste, and even touch.
Oh, I like that. So instead of just saying, I would have a picnic in the park, I could say something like, I'd spread out a blanket under a shady tree and the smell of freshly cut grass would be all around. I'd bite into a juicy strawberry and savor the sweetness, and then enjoy the satisfying crunch of a fresh baguette.
Exactly. Those sensory details pull your listener right into your ideal day and make it much more vivid and memorable.
It's like we're right there with you, experiencing it. What are some other ways to make our descriptions more lively and engaging?
Using figurative language can be really effective. Think about metaphors and similes. They can make your descriptions more interesting by creating comparisons.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Instead of saying, the sun was shining brightly, you could say, the sun was a golden orb radiating warmth like a giant hug.
Wow, that's much more vivid. What about similes? How can those help?
Similes are great too. For example, instead of the clouds were fluffy, you could say the clouds were like cotton candy drifting across the azure sky.
I love that imagery. It adds a touch of whimsy and makes the description more memorable.
And don't forget about using strong verbs and adjectives. Instead of using weak or general words, choose ones that are more specific and interesting. Like instead of walk, you could use stroll, saunter, or hike, depending on where you're walking and how fast you're going.
And instead of just saying happy, You could use ecstatic, joyful, or blissful to really capture how you're feeling.
Exactly. Choosing your words carefully can really add depth to your descriptions and make them more captivating for your listeners.
So it's not just about what we describe, it's about how we describe it. We need to find the words that really capture the essence of our ideal day and make it come alive for others.
Think of it like you're painting a picture with words. The more vibrant and detailed your brushstrokes are, the more beautiful the final painting will be.
I love that analogy. We've been talking a lot about using descriptive language, but I think it's worth mentioning that sometimes less is more.
Oh, that's a really important point. It's tempting to add in every detail, but sometimes a simple, well-crafted sentence can be just as effective as a long paragraph full of descriptions.
It's about finding that balance between giving enough information to engage your listener, but not so much that you overwhelm them.
Exactly. And finding that balance will depend on your personal style and the overall tone you want to create in your description.
So we need to trust our instincts as storytellers and let the words flow naturally.
Absolutely. And just like any skill, practice makes perfect. The more you experiment with different descriptive techniques, the more confident you'll become in expressing yourself.
Speaking of practice, I have a fun challenge for our listeners.
I love a challenge. Tell me more.
Imagine that you're describing your ideal day to someone who doesn't speak English. How would you get your message across using only gestures, facial expressions, and maybe a few basic English words?
What a great challenge. That would really force our listeners to think outside the box and communicate in new ways.
Yeah, it would make them rely more on nonverbal cues, which is a really important part of communication.
I love that idea. It's like a form of storytelling without using a full vocabulary.
And who knows, maybe you'll inspire our listeners to learn some sign language.
That would be fantastic. Communication is such an amazing thing. There's so many different ways to express ourselves and connect with others.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, let's go back to the idea that describing our ideal day can be a form of self-discovery.
It's a chance to really explore what's important to us and maybe even uncover some hidden desires or dreams that we haven't thought about before.
As our listeners are working on their ideal day descriptions, I want them to remember that it's more than just an English exercise. It's a chance to connect with themselves on a deeper level.
You said it perfectly, Mike.
Welcome back to the Learn English Lab for the final part of our deep dive into describing your ideal day.
We've talked about so much already, from descriptive language to that fun challenge of describing your day without speaking. Did you give it a try, listener? We'd love to hear about it.
But now it's time to put it all together and share some last tips for creating a truly amazing description of your perfect day.
I can't wait to hear what you've come up with, Mike.
Well, I think it's important to remember that describing your ideal day is more than just a list of things you would do. It's about telling a story that will draw your listener in and make them feel like they're right there with you.
That's so true. A good story can take us to different places, make us feel different emotions, and create memories that will last a lifetime.
Exactly. So how can we use those storytelling skills to make our ideal day descriptions even better?
Think of your day as a journey, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Start by setting the scene. Introduce yourself and anyone else who might be a part of your day.
Then build some excitement. Describe the activities that you do, the challenges you face, the happy moments you experience.
And to wrap it all up, talk about the overall feeling of the day and why it was so special.
It's like writing a mini novel about our perfect day. And speaking of novels, one way to get better at storytelling is to pay attention to how authors create those amazing scenes in their books.
Reading is such a great way to learn new techniques and get inspiration for our own writing.
Notice how they use dialogue, sensory details, figurative language. All of those things can help create a really immersive experience for the reader.
And don't be afraid to try out those techniques yourself.
So we've talked about storytelling, we've talked about descriptive language, but there's one more important piece of the puzzle: grammar.
Oh yes, grammar. The foundation of good writing. It's easy to get carried away with our creativity, but using correct grammar is essential for clear communication.
What are some of the most common grammar mistakes that our listeners should watch out for when they're describing their ideal day?
One common mistake is using the wrong verb tense. Since we're talking about a hypothetical situation, we need to use the conditional tense, which means using would plus the base form of the verb.
So instead of saying, I go to the beach,
Yeah.
we would say, I would go to the beach.
Exactly. And it's also important to make sure your subjects and verbs agree. For example, if you're talking about yourself and a friend, you would say, we would go to the beach. Not, we would goes to the beach.
Right. And don't forget about those articles. on a carrick. They might seem small, but they make a big difference in how clear your sentences sound.
And prepositions, too, and twelem, they can be tricky, but they're really important for talking about time and location.
Those are all great reminders, Sarah. And listeners, if you're not sure about a grammar rule, there are so many helpful resources available online and in libraries.
Don't be afraid to ask for help or do some extra research. The more effort you put into improving your grammar, the better your writing will be.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our deep dive into describing your ideal day. I hope you've learned a lot about descriptive language storytelling and grammar.
And most importantly, I hope we've inspired you to think about what truly makes you happy and to use your imagination to create a beautiful description of your perfect day.
There's no right or wrong answer. It's all about what brings you joy and peace.
So let your creativity flow and create something that truly represents your ideal day.
And don't forget to share your descriptions with us in the comments. We'd love to hear about your dream day adventures.
And before we say goodbye, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more fun language lessons.
Until next time, keep dreaming, keep practicing, and keep those language skills shining. We'll see you soon for another deep dive. Bye for now. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're going deep with Sarah
Hi, everyone.
into the habits of highly successful people. So get ready,
Yeah.
because we're going to find out what makes them tick and how you can ethically steal their secrets.
It is really interesting how we often think about success as, these big splashy moves.
Right.
But what we're seeing again and again in our research is that it's more about
Yeah.
like the tiny things that people do consistently over time.
It really is. And you know what it makes me think of is like building a skyscraper. You don't just throw the top floor on top and hope for the best.
Exactly.
It's brick by brick, day after day. And it seems like one of those foundational bricks
Yeah.
for these successful people is setting really clear goals.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not talking about just I hope this happens, but really specific,
Yeah.
sharp goals that almost act like filters for all their decisions.
That's a great way to put it. They're really clear about where they're going and how to get there. And without that, it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day
Absolutely.
and lose track of that bigger picture.
You know what else it made me think of was organization.
Oh, yeah.
That seems so simple, but planning your day, prioritizing tasks, even the humble to-do list. These successful people, they love it.
It makes sense when you think about it. You free up so much mental space and energy.
Yeah.
You're not wasting time figuring out what to do next or scrambling to meet a deadline.
Right.
And that structure kind of sets you up for success.
For sure, but here's where it gets even more interesting, right?
Yeah.
It's not enough to just plan.
Yeah.
To be successful, you got to actually do something.
Right.
And that's another big theme we keep seeing is that bias towards action.
Absolutely.
Don't wait for the perfect moment.
Just start.
Just start.
Even if it's a little messy.
Yeah.
Procrastination is the number one enemy of success.
Right.
These highly successful people, they know that doing something consistently,
Yeah.
even if it's a little bit at a time, ultimately leads to big results.
Yeah. And, all this action can't be blind, right?
Yeah.
You need to course correct.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that the next habit that we keep seeing again and again makes so much sense.
Right.
Is self-reflection. Successful people really take the time to look at their strengths,
Yeah.
but even more importantly,
Their weaknesses.
yeah, those weaknesses.
It's so crucial to be able to learn from your mistakes and to adapt.
Right.
And ultimately to improve if you can't be honest with yourself about what needs work.
Right.
How can you ever actually grow?
Yeah, it's like you're your own coach, right? You're constantly looking at your
Yeah.
performance and figuring out how to play the game better.
I love that analogy.
All right, so this next one might surprise you.
Okay.
Frugality. And I want to be clear here. We don't mean being cheap,
Right.
but being resourceful, making the most of what you already have.
Yeah, it's a smart approach, and it shows that you're thinking long term.
Right.
You understand the value of your resources, whether that's money, time, or energy. And it's about making choices today that are going to set you up
Yeah.
for a stronger tomorrow.
I love that it's that old saying, waste not, want not.
Yeah.
And this idea of taking care of what you have kind of extends to yourself too, right?
Yeah.
We saw a lot of these sources talking about having a good diet, regular exercise, even good hygiene.
It's so easy to overlook, but if you think about it,
Right.
your physical health directly impacts your energy levels.
Oh, yeah.
Your focus, your resilience, and
those things are really critical for success in any field.
It's like trying to run a marathon on junk food and no sleep.
Right.
You might make it to the starting line, but
You're not going to win.
you're not going to win. So taking care of yourself is like laying the groundwork
Yeah,
for everything else.
for sure.
Okay, this one probably won't surprise you.
Okay.
Continuous learning.
Of course.
And we're not just talking about formal education here, but like reading, finding mentors, just constantly being curious, expanding your knowledge.
They have this real thirst for knowledge.
And the more you know, the more equipped you are to navigate the world and achieve your goals.
It's like you're collecting tools for your success toolkit,
Right.
right? The more tools you have, the more problems you can solve, the more opportunities you can create.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, ready for a curveball?
Okay.
Multiple sources talked about the importance of saying no.
Oh, interesting.
Not being rude, but setting boundaries,
Yeah.
protecting your time and energy.
Why do you think that's so important?
Well, if you think about it, successful people are so focused on their goals.
Right.
Saying no to things
Yeah.
that don't align with that vision, it's a way to avoid distractions and stay on track.
It makes sense. You have to prioritize.
It's like that classic time management tip. If you don't control your calendar, somebody else will.
That's so true.
All right, and finally, let's talk about something that's definitely not a solo endeavor, networking.
Yeah.
Building those strong relationships keeps coming up in our research.
Of course.
It seems like such a huge factor in success.
For sure, surrounding yourself with other ambitious, driven people, you create the support system. It
Yeah.
opens doors, provides mentorship. It's really invaluable.
It's like building your own personal board of advisors.
Yeah, I like that.
People who challenge you, inspire you, celebrate your wins with you.
Right?
So we've covered a lot here,
We have.
and this is just the beginning.
Just scratching the surface.
But before we go any deeper,
Yeah.
what's resonating with you so far? Like any big aha moments?
I'm really struck by how interconnected all these habits are.
Yeah.
It's not about doing one thing, right?
Right.
It's about creating this whole system of habits that support each other and reinforce each other.
That's a great point. It's not about perfection. It's about building that sustainable system.
Exactly.
Step by step, day by day.
Little by little.
And that's exactly what we're going to keep exploring
Yes.
as we continue this deep dive.
I'm excited.
But for now, we want to hear from you. What habits do you think are essential for success?
Yeah, tell us in the comments.
Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like,
And subscribe.
subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss part 2 of our deep dive.
We'll see you there.
It's like you create this positive feedback loop.
Oh, yeah.
The more you learn, the more you grow, and then the more you achieve, the more you want to keep going.
Right. And speaking of keeping it going, let's circle back to that habit of saying no.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really struggle with that.
It's definitely tough, especially these days when it feels like we're constantly bombarded with requests and demands.
Right.
But it's something we can get better at with practice.
Right.
The more we consciously decide to say no to those things that don't serve us,
Yeah.
the more time and energy we free up for the things that really do align with our goals.
But it's not always easy, right? Like,
Well, it's hard.
there's that fear of missing out,
Yeah.
that pressure to please other people, or that guilt
Definitely.
that can creep in.
I think successful people realize that saying yes to everything is a recipe for burnout.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to fill a leaky bucket.
Oh, yeah.
You can keep pouring in the water, but it's never going to be full.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It really highlights the importance of setting boundaries and taking care of yourself. You got to replenish your own reserves before you can show up for other people
Absolutely.
or chase your own ambitions.
It all comes back to that self-care.
And that brings us back to something we talked about earlier, taking care of your health.
Yeah.
It's so easy to neglect that
Yeah.
when we're busy and stressed.
Right. We let it slide.
But these successful people, they seem to get it.
Yeah.
Like they understand that their physical health is the foundation for everything else.
Makes sense. It impacts your energy,
Yeah,
your focus,
big time.
your resilience.
Yeah, it's like building a house on a shaky foundation.
Right.
No matter how impressive it looks,
Doesn't matter if the base isn't solid.
it's not going to last. And these folks, they prioritize their health
Yeah.
with exercise, nutrition. Rest, they get it.
They know that those habits make their minds and bodies work better.
So it's not about vanity.
No.
It's about giving yourself the tools to perform at your best.
I like that.
And speaking of performing at your best, we've talked about taking action and avoiding procrastination.
Right.
What are some of the strategies that you've seen these successful people use?
Well, one thing that seems to help is breaking down big tasks into smaller steps.
Yeah.
It makes it feel less overwhelming.
Right.
And you get that sense of accomplishment as you check things off your list.
It's like that old saying, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
It's all about making those consistent small efforts that add up.
I love that. And it also helps to set deadlines.
Yeah.
Hold yourself accountable.
Tell a friend use a planner.
Right.
Set reminders.
It's about building that structure
Right.
to support your own motivation.
Absolutely.
But what about when things don't go as planned?
Yeah.
You hit a roadblock.
Happens to everybody.
How do these successful people deal with those inevitable challenges?
You know, one of the keys is that they're really resilient.
Yeah.
They don't look at setbacks as failures,
Right.
but as opportunities to learn and grow.
So they analyze what happened,
Yeah.
figure out what went wrong,
Exactly.
and then they adjust.
It's all about having that growth mindset.
Right.
You don't give up when things get tough. You learn from it and adapt.
And I think a lot of that comes from having a good support system.
Absolutely.
It's so important to surround yourself with people who uplift and inspire you.
Especially when you're struggling.
It's like having your own personal cheering squad.
I love that.
People who believe in you even when you doubt yourself.
Yeah.
And they're there to celebrate your wins too.
It's not just about receiving support.
Right.
It's also about giving it.
Right.
Successful people understand that.
It's like creating this cycle of support
Yeah.
where everybody benefits.
Collaboration is key.
It's amazing how all these habits work together
It really is.
to create this upward spiral of success.
It's like a tapestry.
Oh, yeah.
All these threads woven together to create a beautiful design.
And it's a design that we can all create in our own lives.
Absolutely.
It's not about copying somebody else's blueprint.
Right.
It's about taking these principles
Yeah.
and adapting them to fit your own unique personality and strengths.
It's about finding what works for you.
And it's a process, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's not a one and done.
You're always learning.
It's about constantly learning, experimenting,
Heightening your approach.
refining your approach.
Never stopping.
It's a journey.
That's what makes it so exciting.
It really is.
It's not about reaching some destination.
Right?
It's about embracing the adventure.
And seeing where it takes you.
And it's an adventure that's open to everyone.
Absolutely.
No matter where you are in your journey, you can always choose to embrace these habits
Yeah.
and create a more fulfilling life.
It's so empowering to know that.
It really is. We have the power to shape our own destinies.
I love that. To create the lives that we want.
Absolutely.
To achieve things that we once thought were impossible.
It all starts with believing in yourself.
I think that's a perfect place to pause for now.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
We have. But don't worry,
There's more to come.
we're not done yet.
We're just getting started.
In part 3 of our deep dive,
Yeah.
we're going to explore even more powerful habits
Yeah.
of highly successful people.
Like continuous learning, cultivating a positive mindset.
Setting those clear goals.
So stay tuned.
But in the meantime, we want to hear from you.
What's resonating with you?
What are you struggling with?
Share your thoughts.
Share your insights in the comments below.
We love hearing from you.
And if you're enjoying our deep dive,
Yeah.
hit that like button.
Subscribe to our channel.
Share this episode with your friends.
We're on a mission.
We want to empower everyone to achieve their full potential.
And these habits are essential.
We'll see you in part 3. It's really amazing, isn't it? Like the power of having a clear vision for yourself
Yeah.
and then taking action to make it happen.
Aligning your actions with your aspiration.
Yeah, like almost tapping into this hidden energy source
Right.
that helps you overcome all those obstacles.
It's like this drive that keeps you moving forward.
And keeping that drive going,
Yeah.
that's where the real magic is, right?
Mhm.
And it's funny
It is.
because it's something we keep seeing again and again in our research is the importance of consistency.
Oh, yeah.
Discipline. These successful people, they've got this down.
They really do. Success isn't about some big one-time effort.
Right.
It's about showing up every single day.
Yeah.
Even when you don't feel like it,
Doing the work.
putting in the work. And over time,
Right.
those efforts build up momentum.
It's like we are what we repeatedly do.
Exactly. Success is a habit.
I love that. And it makes me think of like building muscle.
Oh, yeah.
The more you exercise that discipline muscle,
Yeah, huh?
the stronger it gets.
The easier it becomes
Yeah.
to stick with it.
And I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
that it's not about being perfect.
Oh, no. Nobody's perfect.
We all slip up. We all have those days where
We fall short.
we fall short. It's about progress,
Right.
not perfection.
It's about recognizing those slip-ups,
Right.
learning from them, and getting back on track.
And having that compassion for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Understanding that setbacks are going to happen.
They're part of the process.
So we've talked a lot about how successful people view those challenges as opportunities.
Right.
But how do they actually do that?
Well, one thing I've noticed is that they're really adaptable.
Okay.
They don't get stuck in one way of thinking.
So they're flexible.
They analyze what went wrong, they figure out the lesson,
Yeah.
and then they adjust based on that new information.
So they're constantly learning,
They're constantly refining their strategies, experimenting,
getting better.
always improving.
And this all ties back to that continuous learning,
Oh, for sure.
right? Being open to new information.
Yeah. New perspectives, new ways of doing things.
Yeah, it's like they understand that the world is changing all the time.
Right.
And to stay ahead of the game,
You got to keep learning
you got to keep learning
and growing and expanding your knowledge.
and having that growth mindset,
Absolutely.
right? Believing that we can always learn more.
Yeah. Your abilities aren't fixed.
You can always grow. So we've covered so much in this deep dive,
We have
looking at all these habits that set these successful people apart.
so many great insights.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
what are you taking away from this?
You know, I think for me, the biggest thing is that success isn't some secret formula or
Yeah.
luck. It's about developing these habits,
Right.
making those small, consistent choices day after day.
And over time, those choices add up to big results.
Exact.
It's about taking charge of your own journey,
Owning it.
embracing the process, and knowing that we all have that potential
Yeah.
to achieve amazing things.
It's all about that commitment to growth.
Absolutely. And it's a journey that's open to everybody.
For sure.
It doesn't matter where you're starting from.
It's never too late.
You can always choose to embrace these habits.
Right, and start building the life you want.
It's pretty inspiring, isn't it?
It is.
Like, we really do have the power to shape our own destinies.
And achieve our dreams.
That's what it's all about. And we really hope
Yeah.
this deep dive has given you the tools and the inspiration
To get started.
to start creating that life you want.
It's all within your reach.
And if you're feeling motivated
Yeah.
to start putting these habits into practice,
We'd love to hear from you.
let us know in the comments below.
Tell us about the habits you're focusing on.
And of course, if you enjoyed this deep dive,
Yeah.
hit that like button, subscribe to our channel.
And share this episode with your friends.
We want to help everybody achieve their full potential.
These habits are the key.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
We believe in you,
We do.
and we can't wait to see what you accomplish.
Keep learning. Keep growing.